Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. It is Tuesday, and it's just another day into the offseason, a little bit earlier than what we anticipated, but college football isn't done. Like we know, college football playoffs do start on Friday. Alabama plays Oklahoma, and our friends over at FanDuel, not a whole lot of movement in some of the lines so far. Alabama, they're still 1.5-point favorites in their game. Texas A&M and Miami, it's still a 3.5-point game in Texas A&M's favor. And then obviously the spreads in the Ole Miss, Tulane, and Oregon James Madison game are all 3-possession games. So not a whole lot of change there. Not really expecting any fireworks in the first round. And in the closest game, Alabama, Oklahoma, based on their style of play, not expecting a whole lot of fireworks in that game either. But that's a different story for a different day. But Brian, today we have a loaded show coming everybody's way, and we're going to kick it off with, look, now that the season's over, a lot of outlets, specifically 5 main ones, are starting to rattle off their All-American list. And so we're going to give a quick recap. We've been cranking out a lot of content and putting out all the articles about, Jeremiah Love, Leonard Moore, Billy Shrout, Jadarian Price. So we're going to talk about them and the All-America honors that they are starting to kind of rack up in the offseason. And then we're going to dive into some of the questions that this team has. And really, part one of that is going to be the questions for the team, and then part two is going to be questions in the offense. We're going to cover the questions for the defense and the special teams on Thursday. And just to preface here, folks, these are questions that we just don't have answers to. These are legitimate questions that we're all going to find out together as the offseason progresses into spring, summer workouts, and then eventually into fall camp. And then we are wrapping up today's show with a mailbag. So make sure you get your questions, comments, concerns in throughout the show. Brian, a lot of content coming everybody's way. I'm excited to dive into it.
Yeah, I mean, it's so we've got 3 of the 5 All-America lists that go to the consensus and unanimous, as you mentioned. Sporting News will come out tomorrow. I believe Football Writers Association comes out within the next week as well. So we'll find out very soon about that. But, look, I just felt like there needs to be a bridge from when the 25 season ends into the 26 season. We don't just say, okay, 25's over, let's completely jump into 26 and start doing previews. I think there's a lot of things, number one, that have to happen before we even know what the 26 team is going to look like, much less the things that previewing positions. So I kind of thought it was important for us to spend a couple days, and we'll do just the team topics and then offense. And then Thursday, we'll have a bias to hold tomorrow. And then Thursday, we'll do defense and special teams. And the point of this is to say, okay, what are the things that Notre Dame needs to address? What are the questions about the program in 2026? Some of them are going to be, okay, how do you replace this player? Some of them are going to be, how do you make this adjustment? How do you fix that? And they're all different aspects of building to the point where Notre Dame can go out there and win a championship, because we can all sit here and be mad that Notre Dame got screwed by the playoff committee, and we are, and they did, while also saying, but there are things about this team that gave the committee an opportunity to screw them that need to be fixed so that next year you aren't in this situation again, going into the last weekend of the rankings, and you're like, oh, please don't screw us over. Please don't screw us over. I want to be in a situation where nobody can cry about the MOU, which a lot of people are, because, it doesn't matter anyway. Notre Dame's the 2 seed or the 3 seed or the 1 seed. And so when we talk about questions, it's not, these are questions about whether or not Notre Dame's going to be good or not. There's going to be one like that. Most of the others are, okay, here's where they are, somewhere in here. They got to get here if they want to win a championship. And that's the new bar at Notre Dame under Marcus Freeman. It's not, all right, are they going to go, 4-8 next year? Or are they going to, be better? Are they going to fall back? There's kind of like, okay, this is the baseline of where the team is now. And now the question, and we know we're going to get basically this every year. The question is, what are they going to do to go here? And I think that is going to be what a lot of our focus is going to be on this week with our shows. And so I'm looking forward to having that conversation, Trevor, because it's interesting. There's there's some theories out there about what they need to do. And sometimes I feel like, okay, I think people are missing the boat on what plagued this team. And it gets you thinking to like, I hope the coaches don't miss the boat on what they need to fix and that we can avoid those conversations. So that will be what a lot will be about today. But we also felt it was important to show some recognition to the guys that are getting tremendous honors. And while a lot of us are ready to kind of move on past the 2025 season, I don't want to move on so quick that we don't recognize the greatness that is what's happening for these young men with these All-American squads. So far, I mean, there's been like over 10 total All-American squads come out, but like the 5 that matter the most and matter the most from a unanimous consensus All-American standpoint are the Associated Press, Sporting News, Football Writers Association of America, American Football Coaches Association, and then the 5th one is, I always draw a blank on the 5th one. It's AP, it's Sporting News, it's AFCA, it's Football Writers, and then what is the 5th one? It's already come out. Walter Camp. Walter Camp is the 5th one. The Walter Camp All-American team is the 5th one. And so 3 of those have come out. Walter Camp has come out. The AP has come out. And then today, the AFCA, American Football Coaches Association All-America teams came out. And so far, we've had 3 players earn unanimous so far first-team All-America honors. That's Jeremiah Love and Leonard Moore. And then another player's earned, I believe, 2 All-America honors, second and third team. I believe Jadarian Price has got second and third team. And then Billy Schrouth today was named second team on the Football Coaches Association. So we want to talk about that. And Trev, just to begin, it's no shock that Jeremiah Love so far has dominated the first team honors for the All-America teams.
No, I mean, it's not a surprise that he's on every first-team All-American offense. And most of the major outlets that have came out already, like you said, we're still waiting on Sporting News and the Football Writers Association. I'm a betting man. I'm willing to bet that he's going to be a first-team All-American on those as well. I mean, he's the Doak Walker winner. He was the best running back in college football this season. And look, we've spent a lot of time talking about his stats and his accolades and what he did. But some of what makes Jeremiah Love so great is just the eye test. You know, a lot of the counter of him in the Heisman Trophy conversation was, looking at just the overall numbers, big picture. They didn't want to talk about the fact that there was another running back in that backfield who has also been named to 2 All-American teams that had 113 carries for 674 yards and 11 touchdowns. I've heard a lot of comparisons around, if Ashton Genty didn't win it in that season. Yeah, well, in 2024, their second leading rusher was their quarterback with 200 some odd rushing yards and 5 touchdowns. It's a little bit different animal when you're talking about Jadarian Price sharing a backfield with a running back. But it is no surprise that Jeremiah Love is so far really, he's collecting first-team All-American selections like Infinity Stones, and I'm expecting it to continue, man. It's really impressive.
It is, and it just speaks to his brilliance this season. And honestly, I'm a bit surprised. I thought that we would see some other guys get honors with him. Maybe in one person has him as Ahmed Hardy, one has Kewan Lacey, one has Emmett Johnson. But so far, all 3 have had Ahmed Hardy and Jeremiah Love, which I think is how it should be. I think those are, to me, very clearly the 2 best running backs in college football. And as I was debating with someone the other day, just because you have the most yards doesn't make you the best player. And so I just feel like watching tape, watching film, I think those are the 2 best running backs in college football this year. And so far they've gotten those honors. And, for Jeremiah Love, it's not just about, I think there's a lot of fans of other teams that just are either just don't watch. There's a lot of people that just don't watch other teams. They talk about this team sucks, that team sucks, this player sucks. And all they do is look at stat sheets and don't actually watch film. Or they may only watch a guy once and they'll say, well, I only rushed for 1,300 yards. I'm like, all right, cool. Those 1,300 yards were still the 4th most in all of college football. I mean, let's not act like he was 19th in rushing yards, but there's so much more to Jeremiah Love than just that. And I think and what I'm happy about is that these All-America teams have looked past certain stat lines and said, okay, these are the 2 best running backs in college football. I know Kewan Lacey had a lot more touchdowns than Ahmed Hardy, but he wasn't a better running back than Ahmed Hardy. And I think those are things you look at. Same thing with Jeremiah Love. I know that the other, those Emmett Johnson and Kewan Lacey had more yards, but they weren't better players than Jeremiah Love. And it's not just the total yards. It's the all around performance from Jeremiah Love. It's the dominance in the run game, and it's the impact in the pass game. People say, "Oh, he didn't even rush for 100 yards against A&M." I'm like, "Yeah, but he went for over 140 yards of offense and had 2 touchdowns." That's what makes him such a great player. Is you can try and bottle him up all you want, but the only people that have really stopped Jeremiah Love this season are, you could argue, is Notre Dame, with some of the decisions they made in the first game not to get him the ball or to run RPOs that even put the quarterback in position to make some mistakes and things along those lines. And so when you watch Jeremiah Love this season, I don't think there's any doubt from anyone who's trying to even remotely be objective that he's the best running back in college football. And to get the Doak Walker Award, Notre Dame's first ever Doak Walker Award winner, and to get these honors is really tremendous recognition for a young man who had a tremendous career. And same thing goes for Leonard Moore, who's just getting started.
Oh, he is, man. I mean, last thing I'll say about Jeremiah Love, I mean, the Doak Walker Award outside of the Heisman Trophy was the only other award that FanDuel even had odds for of who the winner was going to be. And it was clearly far and away Jeremiah Love. Like the day before the trophy ceremony, he was at like minus 1,500 odds to win it. Next closest person was at plus 650, and that was Ahmed Hardy. So I agree with every sentiment that you said. Best running back in college football. Now we get to talk about what we believe to be is the best cornerback in college football. And that's a really great spot to be in when you're Notre Dame. I think it was you that brought it up in a show. I can't show or one of our conversations backline, but you were talking about when's the last time Notre Dame got to go and do a season and say that they had the best running back and the best cornerback in the country. They don't get to say that a whole lot, but Leonard Moore is also a first-team All-American in the 3 that have came out already. Walter Camp, he's also a first-team All-American in the Associated Press, and then today the AFCA. So, I mean, man, it is impressive watching what he's done. And my biggest takeaway from all of this, it's crazy that he has to come back to college for another year.
You keep saying that. I want you to pipe down. I don't want you to give any ideas to anybody about trying to find a way for Leonard Moore to be Mike Williams or Maurice Clarett. Okay, let's not go there. I say jokingly, but look, when I look at Leonard Moore, what's actually something that's been a little surprising is there's only been one variation in the secondary too. Usually every year there's like multiple different players. There's one All-American team that had Michael Taft instead of Bishop Fitzgerald at safety. Everybody else has had Leonard Moore at corner and Mansour Delane from LSU at corner. They've had Caleb Downs at safety and Bishop Fitzgerald at safety from USC. And the only one that was different, I believe, is the AFCA, who had Michael Taft from Texas. I'm a little surprised that Bishop Fitzgerald has been an All-American, like a consensus first-team All-American. That does surprise me a little bit. But other than that, I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that the other 3. I think there's some debate about who the second safety is, but Leonard Moore, Mansour Delane, and Delaney and Caleb Downs are without a doubt the 3 best defensive backs in college football this season. And I do think that I do believe that Leonard Moore would have had a better chance to maybe win the Thorpe Award or some of those other awards had he not missed 2 games. And so that's why I think Caleb Downs won the award. I think he earned it. Had played 13 games. Also had a tremendous impact. But when you look at the impact Leonard Moore has had for Notre Dame the last 2 years, I mean, he comes right away, makes an impact. I mean, you're hearing first week of camp, coaches really love what he's doing. He's forced into the starting lineup against Louisville, playing field corner, makes some plays. Has some first game struggles, but also makes some big plays in coverage. Has the huge, catching Tyler Shuck, who's now starting quarterback in the NFL, from behind, forcing the ball out. Then Notre Dame recovers. And then just after Benjamin Morrison goes down, steps into the boundary and just is a star. And you wondered coming into the year, would there be a sophomore slump? Was now that teams know who he is, would they be able to find weaknesses in his game? And, credit to them, Miami and Texas A&M weren't afraid to throw at him. And it kind of didn't go very well for them at times, especially Texas A&M trying to go throw at Leonard Moore. He had a 1 pick and then almost picked off another, almost had another one-handed catch in the end zone. And maybe if he doesn't have a busted up ankle that cost him the next 2 games, maybe he makes that catch, who knows? But just a heck of a player all year. And just a quiet kid off the field, at least, from a media standpoint, very calm, reserved, intelligent young man. But on the football field, he's an absolute monster as a corner. I mean, just lockdown cover guy, elite athleticism, tremendous instincts. He's a smart kid. as well. He's not just an elite athlete out there getting by on his elite athleticism. He's a very smart football player, very sound football player. You can tell he takes coaching. And he's a big-time playmaker. I think that's the thing that maybe more than anything grew this year for his game, as I thought his all-around play was stronger. His technical prowess improved. You could tell he was more on in tune with what teams were doing, and I thought that was really impressive for his performance this season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd been saying it all year. You've been saying it all year. We believe that Leonard Moore is the best cover cornerback in college football, and I believe that he'll also get that accolade coming into the 2026 season. Watching him this year was absolutely special. And anymore, just in the game of football in general, that this isn't specific to college. This isn't specific to the NFL. I mean, shoot, it might not even be specific to high school, depending on where you go. You need to have a successful defense. You need to have a lockdown corner. And Notre Dame has that. And they have the potential to have another one, too. That, I mean, definitely something we're going to talk about throughout the offseason. But look, man, for all the struggles that Notre Dame had on defense, there was very few consistencies on that side of the ball. And number 15 in the boundary was one of those consistencies. Outside of the one double move he allowed against Miami, that is the blemish, I guess, on his resume from the 2025 season. And obviously a lot of these All-American voters and the people who coined him a finalist for the Jim Thorpe Award and a finalist for the Bronco Nagurski Award, they didn't view it as too big of a blemish. He is an absolutely special player, and he has been just tremendous to watch since he stepped on the field, really. It's been really, really impressive. Another player, Brian, that I know that we wanted to highlight as well, and he has made 2 of these All-American lists, 2 of the 3 that have came out, I believe. And this is more as a specialist, not as a running back. It's more of as a return player. But Jadarian Price, somebody that was also a finalist for the Paul Hornung Award, which goes to the most versatile player in college football. He's currently a finalist for the Jet Award, goes to the country's best returner. Jadarian Price was special this year, man. And he is somebody that not only impacted the game on the offensive side of the ball, but, I mean, he was your best returner this year, kind of by a mile. 2 kick returns for a touchdown this season, 1 against Purdue, 1 against USC, which is still crazy, the fact that they elected to kick to him again.
Seriously, he has ripped you up 3 years in a row. He did it as a returner in 23. He did it as a running back last year, comes off the bench, rushes over 100 yards in the second half alone, and then you kick to him again this year after he already ripped off 1 long run on you. You're just like, what are you thinking? But I'm glad they thought that. I'm glad they made that decision. Worked out real well. Trev, I was actually at the press box at the time, and I can't remember if it was, I think my dad was there. And as soon as I saw him drifting to the middle, around the goal line, like he was going to catch it, I was like, uh-oh. I literally verbally said, uh-oh. Like, you kicked it down the middle, which is not where the USC coaches were like, hey, kick it right down the middle to Jadarian Price. You know what I mean? Like, that the kicker just missed. Because you're just like, oh, if you get him the ball right down the middle, this might be a wrap. And I mean, I literally verbally said, uh-oh, before he even caught the ball, because I was like, oh, this is going to be fun. But he was named 2nd team on the Walter Camp Award. He was named 3rd team All-American. With all due respect to Casey Concepcion and the kid from Iowa, I don't know that there was a better returner this year than Jadarian Price. And not just, for the production, but also the big moment production. I mean, just answering a Purdue touchdown with a score. And then, of course, the big one against USC, the job he did against Pitt when they kicked to him twice, and both times he just ripped Pitt up, I think says a lot about the performance that he had as a player. So tremendous season for Jadarian Price. And he's not just a returner either. He can't just focus on being a great returner. He's got to be a running back, and he's got to grow his all-around game. And I've said this before, and I just feel it needs to be mentioned. I don't know that Jadarian Price is going to come back next year. And if I was a betting man, I'd probably bet he's not going to come back next year. But it says so much about him in this day and age that he turned down more money to go be the number 1 back somewhere else because he wanted to stay at Notre Dame and be part of this team. And I just think in this era where that's a rare commodity, when kids are that way, they deserve praise. And Jadarian Price absolutely deserves praise for how he conducted himself this season. And it's not that he necessarily chose to conduct himself that way. That's just who he is. And that's what I love about this running back room is the 2 guys that started and played all the. I mean, they're not just great football players. They are, but they're really awesome young men. And that's not always the case. it is with these two.
I mean, the second episode of Here Comes the Irish came out yesterday, and I sat down and watched it, and there was a segment in there about Jadarian Price. I didn't know his backstory. I thought that was fantastic. Some of the things that he went through as a young man going through high school and then leading up into college. And there was a segment in there where he talked about, hey, look, where I grew up, you were either a Texas Longhorns fan or an Oklahoma Sooners fan. I didn't want to be either. I wanted to go off. I wanted to write my own story and build my own path. And I thought that was really, really cool. He made a joke. It's funny because you and I growing up around the area, like being around the area for so long, obviously we know what Notre Dame is and what it means. But for somebody that grew up down in Denison, Texas, he was like, yeah, I decided to go to some random Catholic school in northern Indiana. It was funny the way that he worded it. But yeah, I think that kind of speaks to who he is. And he wanted to write his own story. Marcus Freeman praised him all the time for being an unselfish player. And I think that you see a lot of that in his upbringing, from the backstory, talking about what he had to do going through middle school and high school. So Jadarian Price is a great story. If he did indeed play his final game in a Notre Dame uniform, it was a pleasure to watch him all these times, and very deserving of these All-American honors. That is 100% for sure. The last player, Brian, that I know got mentioned, and it was today, it was Billy Schrauth, was named a second-team All-American by the AFCA, and Notre Dame's only lineman that has been named so far. And I know you and I were talking beforehand how we thought it was a little interesting considering Billy Schrauth didn't finish the rest of the season. But when he did play, argument could be made he was their most consistent, arguably their most dominant offensive lineman throughout the games that he did play. So he earned second-team All-American honors on the AFCA today. That was announced earlier this afternoon.
I was surprised by this. I mean, he played 7 games. I'm not surprised that he was playing like an All-American prior to his injury. And as I believe I said, I might have said this in either in the story I wrote or in a response. I think it was actually in a reply post to a comment that I think Akshat Shakar said, like, look, okay, well, surprising, but I'll take it, basically. And it was surprising because he only played 7 games. But that's the only reason it was surprising. Had he not gotten hurt, this is a no-brainer. I mean, Billy Schrauth had an outstanding season for Notre Dame. When you look at the job he did, obviously coming off the injury last year, even when he came back for the Navy game, played the rest of the year, he clearly wasn't 100% all season. And he kept battling and came back and not only emerged as a top player for Notre Dame, but emerged as a captain for Notre Dame, which that's not something I would have predicted in the offseason. Just because he's more of a quiet guy. He's matured a ton in his career, and he's really had excellent performance. And look, the pass blocking that we saw from him this year was expected. He was a very good pass blocking guard last season. He gave up 8 pressures last year, only 8 pressures all season last season in 12 games, which is a pretty good number for a guard. Not an elite number when you consider how infrequently Notre Dame threw the ball, but it's definitely a good number for a guy in his first full season. And this year in 213 pass snaps, he only allowed 2 pressures all season, and neither of them resulted in a sack or a hit in the last 2 years. So that encompasses, that would be 603 pass snaps and a total of 24 games. No, excuse me. It'd be 19 games. Billy Schrauth has only allowed 10 total pressures, 1 sack, 0 hits on the quarterback in those 2 seasons. That's pretty good. What changed this year, however, is he's always been a good run blocker. I've pointed out in the past, when he's on, he's a dominant run blocker, but he wasn't consistent. He'd have some really good snaps and then some like, dude, what are you doing? Like, there was a playoff game. It was Penn State. Billy got his butt whooped in the first half. And then you go watch him in the second half and you're like, that's a different dude. And that lack of consistency is one thing that kind of plagued him a little bit in 2024. What I thought that made him so effective this year is he didn't lose any dominance, but he was just more consistent. We just saw a more, okay, this is Billy being Billy. I mean, everybody's going to have their misses here, their misses there, a bad game here. But just overall, he was really good all season until the moment he injured. And the disappointing thing is he was in the midst of probably the best game of his career when he got injured against USC. I mean, he was blowing people up that whole game. First level, second level, just making great blocks left and right. And, of course, I think that game kind of was a bit of a spotlight game for him but he was very good all season. He was their best lineman against Texas A&M, arguably both years against Texas A&M.
Yeah.
So to watch him raise his level of play, raise his performance, be the impact player that he was, and to get an honor like this despite just playing 7 games, I think speaks volumes about, obviously this group of voters was very impressed by the job he did, and, thought that, what he did in 7 games was better than, what these other guys did in 12 or 13. I just think that says a lot about how good he was when he was playing.
I agree. I don't think it's a coincidence that the American Football Coaches Association is the one that voted him a second-team All-American. I mean, you just take a look at what he put out on film in the 7 games he did play. I agree with you completely. But, I expect more accolades to pour in. Still waiting on the FWAA and Sporting News to come out. You said Sporting News is tomorrow, correct?
Tomorrow. That'll come out tomorrow.
Sounds good. And then the Football Writers Association will come out sometime, and I would assume the next calendar week or so.
And our guy Bill Bender is obviously associated with both of those. That he hosts a show on CFB Nation. They did a show this morning talking about the Michigan fallout, talking about the Diego Pavia fallout, who's just completely clowned himself since the Heisman Trophy. I'm like, this is who he's always been. Like, did you watch the SEC thing on Netflix this summer? That's who that kid is. Which is one of the reasons I've said for a while, I can't stand that kid as heck of a player, but just not my cup of tea as a young man. But and then they also talked about the portal quarterback. So that's just kind of my stance on Diego Pavia. I'm not the biggest fan in the world, but when I look at the next couple, I mean, Bill's also the president of the Football Writers Association this year. So they'll have those last 2 out, and I don't know that Jadarian or that will be on both. I would be a little surprised if Billy was on both, but it's still pretty cool to have this honor. So we'll talk about those when they're all done. Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price are 2 first-team honors away from being unanimous All-Americans. Now, last year Xavier Watts got left off the first team from the Football Writers, which is still absurd. That kept him from being unanimous. He was on 4 of 5. So it's not a given that they're both going to be on there. I'll be shocked if they're not on the Sporting News. It's the Football Writers that's the big. Well, let's see how that one goes. For me, we'll see. Hopefully they right the wrong from last year and they're both unanimous All-Americans. I think it's worth pointing out, and I've put this in all the articles that I've done on Jeremiah so far. Do you know the last time that Notre Dame had a unanimous All-American at running back was 1966. The last time they had a consensus All-American, it was Nick Eddy in 1966. I love the names from back in the day. Marchie Schwartz was also a unanimous All-American in 1931. And then Vegas Ferguson was a consensus All-American in 1979. So the last time Notre Dame had a consensus All-American was when I was 1. I was 1 year old the last time that happened. I am not young. You know what I'm saying, Trev? It's been a minute. So just a tremendous honor for Jeremiah. He's going to be a consensus one. Now we're going to find out if he's going to be unanimous. And that's a pretty cool deal. The corner ones happened more recently. Obviously, Julian Love was a consensus All-American, a unanimous All-American in 2018. As a corner, Xavier Watts was, I believe, a unanimous All-American in 2023. So, and it was a consensus one last season. So quite the honors there still, but yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
Brian, in part 2 of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, we're going to be talking about some of the questions that this team has entering the 2026 season. Like you talked about, I wrote an article earlier today it came out earlier today, just about what are some of the lessons that were learned from 2025. And as we kind of transition and we're kind of starting to close the chapter from a program view on the 2025 season, there are just some questions that we have that kind of surround this program. And we're going to break this down between big picture team view. And we're also going to talk about offense today. And then on Thursday, we're going to talk about defense and special teams. So don't worry, we will be talking about defense and special teams. We're just saving that for Thursday, considering Wednesday's buy sell hold. But
yeah, because like we wanted to have like a real good conversation on it, right? Like on all 3 of the topics. But I felt that if we did all of them, we would have to shorten them because otherwise it's going to be like a 5-hour show. Because there's some good conversation to have here. So that's why we decided, like, look, let's do team and offense today, and then we'll do a mailbag. And then Thursday we'll do defense and special teams. Because I do think we need to spend some time on special teams. That'll be one of our few special teams segments. Like, it's going to be a whole segment on special teams. And I thought it was worth it because I do think there's some legitimate answers that we need to discuss when it comes to the Notre Dame special teams in a lot of different ways. And so we'll have those conversations sandwiched right around the BISA hold. So, Salty, if you're can take a break from distracting the chat from the things we're actually talking about in the show. Love you, Salty. We are going to do a BISA hold tomorrow. If you haven't put that on the board yet, it'd be a good time to put that on the board. He may have already done it, but just in case, wanted to get that out there. So let's rock and roll and talk about this, Trev, because I think when I look at this team and I think about next year's team, there's this sentiment that, oh, man. And I was talking with somebody, shout out to Benny, who I met at a listener of ours. I met 2 listeners of ours last night at Costco, which is pretty awesome. They came up and said hi to Ange and I, so we appreciate that. I think it was Larry was one, Benny was the other. Appreciate you guys. But he's talking about, like, man, I think it was Benny said, like, I don't want to be the teams that play Notre Dame next year. And I think that we're all kind of assuming that. But the first and the biggest question that I really have, Trevor, is how is this team going to respond to the playoff screw job? Is it something that fires this team up, makes them angry, makes them better? Or is it something that can kind of maybe fracture the team a little bit? You know, the guys have extra time on their hands. They're going through this month of December. They're fielding more offers. They're doing this. They're doing that. Their agents in their ear. Their friends are in their ear. Their parents are in their ear. And now all of a sudden there's some entitlement builds up. Instead of right now, they'd be practicing getting ready for that first round game, maybe against Oklahoma, should have been against Oklahoma. And instead, here's where we are. I think my prediction is that this is going to be something that fires the team up. But I think it's a legitimate question about how is this team going to actually respond. I think they, responded in a certain way after the season. They decided not to go to a bowl game. We've talked about our opinion on that. But I don't know that it's a given that they're going to respond positively. I'm hopeful. I think that's going to be the case. But I still need to see it, Trevor. And that's going to be something that we're going to find out starting over these next couple of weeks as we hear who is and who isn't going to jump in the portal. Is how locked in are these guys to feeling like screwed? And do they say, well, screw it, the system's rigged, so I'm just going to go get mine? I'm going to focus on me? Or is it something like, hey, boys, we got screwed as a team, and we've got to come together and really turn this into, quote unquote, tackling fuel for next season. You know what I mean? And really make it something that it is a revenge tour for this football team. I want to see that.
I am very curious to see how they respond here. And this is probably the most overarching question that I wish I had the answer to. I think it gets sorted out into 1 to 2 buckets. I'm probably in the minority here because of the culture that Freeman built. And it's a very valid concern, but because of the culture Freeman built, I don't see a whole lot of people like just leaving the team. It's definitely a concern. I don't want to be naive and say there's no way. It could. My biggest concern with this response is, does it get filtered into the conversation of time heals all wounds? Like, does it get filtered into that was like 8 months ago though, bro. Like, it's a new season. We know what we have in front of us. And, last season was frustrating. It didn't go the way that we wanted to, but hey, we're, geared up and gold standard, and we're going to continue to challenge everything. We're going to work hard and, 10 toes down and focus on this season. Or is it going to be like, hey, we remember what happened last year, and we're not going to give the committee an opportunity to screw us out of the playoffs this year because we're going to handle business from weeks 1 to week 14. I see it going one of those 2 ways. The thing that I get concerned about is in July. I'm not worried about the spring. Like, spring, it's still kind of fresh. Like, the national championship game is in January, the one that this team fully believed and was fully capable of playing in this season. National championship games in January. I could see that being the fuel in March. It's like, hey, 45 days ago, we watched a national championship game. That should have been us. Let's grind. Let's go to work. What's the mindset in July? Is it hey, they still screwed us out. This is ridiculous. Or it's like, come on, bro. Like that was like 6 months ago. That's my concern. That's something that I've seen happen time and time again. Like I'll get super fired. I mean, I can speak about it personally. When I'll get super fired up about something. It's like, that's ridiculous. Oh my goodness. And then like 2 months go by. It's like, Lauren will bring it up. So like, hey, do you remember when you were super mad about that? I'm like, oh yeah, I do. That was crazy. I hope that the Notre Dame football team doesn't do that. That's my biggest concern with this one. So I'm hoping that they use it as fuel. They use it as motivation. I'm not saying never accept it. At some point, you reach the acceptance stage, but use it as fuel. Don't accept it and then just be like, well, it is what it is. Let bygones be bygones. Like we could have done differently too, which is true. That's what we're going to spend a lot of the offseason talking about. It's what we're going to spend a lot of today talking about. But that can't be the biggest takeaway. And then that's what lets you ease that transition. That's the biggest thing.
That is the biggest thing. It's not just we got screwed by the playoff committee. It's we're not going to allow ourselves to we're not going to put ourselves in that situation again. We're on a revenge tour that starts game one. Doesn't start mid-September, late September, and October like this year's did. We're like, hey, I'm glad you guys are pissed off about losing the championship game. I'm glad you finally started to show that you were pissed off by game 3, game 4. You know, like maybe next year you start showing it in game 1. And I think that's the thing is because like I actually do think it matters now, Trev. I do think it matters in the spring because I feel like if you know, I think this next month is going to be the most important window in next year's season. And what I mean by that is I'm a firm believer that how you start an offseason is going to have play a huge role in how that season finishes. Because if you don't start hungry, then you got to try to build that. And I don't know that that's kind of the way to go. I feel like if this team doesn't start hungry, it's going to tell us a lot about the culture of this football team, which is something we questioned early in 2025. It is something we questioned early in 2024, which we'll get to here in a second. But I just feel like if we see 6, 7, 8 guys jump in the portal, that even really 4 or 5 guys jump in the portal that we didn't expect to jump in the portal, that Dame didn't want to jump in the portal, it does tell me a little bit about where the locker room is in this regard. And if it's more than that, then that shows me that, like, okay, now we know why this team maybe wasn't where they needed to be.
Sure.
Now, that could also go one of two directions. It could be that, like, a bunch of guys that were me jumped in the portal, and now you may not be as talented as this position, but you're more bought in. It could be that, you know, that it could go that direction as well. And now we're even better off. You know, like, so it doesn't have to always be a bad thing. And if a bunch of guys stay and don't go in the portal, that means a lot of players at Notre Dame turn down more money to go somewhere else to stay for various reasons. So I think that's step one. And then once you get through that window, step 2 is getting back in January, starting the winter conditioning and having that edge right away, having that pissed offness right away. Because if you don't have it in January, you're not going to have it in March and April. And if you don't have it in March and April, you're not going to have it in June and July. And I do think that there comes a point in time where you have to move past 2025 and that anger of being screwed over. You got to move past it from the standpoint of it can't be your entire focus. But what can stay is that feeling you had inside when that moment happened that you say, I don't ever want to feel that again. I'm never going to put my situation in that again. And so it's not so much that you're pounding the weight because screw the committee, screw the Heisman voters. It's you're pounding that weight because we're going to dominate. They're not going to stop us this year. They're not going to stand in our way this year. We're not going to stand in our way this year. I'm never going to feel that way again. We're going to make the rest of college football feel that way. That's a different type of energy, and that's more the energy you need. I mean, I said this after this season is so much is comparable to the 25 to the 2015 to the 2016 season. And what I mean by that is I'm not worried that this team is going to go 4-8 again. But you had that 2015 season. You lost some epic generational talent from that team. there were some questions about how would this team respond to some late season bad things that happened. Obviously losing to Stanford in a last-second manner, losing the bowl game, and that team didn't respond very well at all. The coaches did not respond very well at all, and that team fell apart. And I kind of look at next year as one of those things, Trev, where how they respond to this is going to determine whether this team is playing for the championship next January, or if this team not only misses the playoffs, they're not even in playoff conversation come the end of the season. I feel like there's how they respond to this is going to I feel like there's not going to be an in-between. They're going to be dominant or they're going to be a disappointment. Like, I get that kind of energy from the moment, not from the team, not from the players, but this is the kind of moment that we see from great teams. And I loved the fact that Marcus Freeman had Kevin Corrigan come talk to the team like right after they got screwed. Did you hear about that?
No.
Yeah, so a couple people reported this, that Marcus Freeman had Kevin Corrigan, the head coach of the lacrosse team, come talk to the Notre Dame football team shortly after they got snubbed. Because if you remember, before they won back-to-back national titles, they got absolutely screwed by the playoff committee for lacrosse and got left completely out. And everybody was like lacrosse people are like, wait a minute, what the heck is going on? I mean, I didn't know. I'm just reading what like people that cover the sport were like, this team got screwed. Like, how is Notre Dame not in the playoffs? And they came out the next 2 years and dominated and won back-to-back national titles. And I thought that said something. Like, I think Freeman understands the task at hand. Can he push the right buttons to get the most out of this team? We're going to find that out. But I think he understands the task at hand. And I think if what was reported is true, and I have no reason to believe it's not, because I know Marcus Freeman has a great relationship with a lot of the other coaches on campus, and I know he has a great relationship with Kevin Corrigan, the lacrosse coach, and vice versa, it wouldn't shock me if they did that. And Kevin Corrigan's been very supportive of the football team as well. I mean, he's a Notre Dame man through and through. So if the players and the coaches respond well to this injustice from a football sports standpoint, but then also learn the lessons from what they did to put themselves in this situation, then I think this team could be special in 2026. I really do. And so that's the biggest question that's going to answer.
Yeah, I do too, man. I think that's a really good parallel talking about 15 to 16 season. I'll even go a step further. If they respond the right way, we could see something like what we saw from 17 to 18. In 2017, it's like, hey, we had a good team. We should have done more. Like, we should not have lost to Miami in that fashion. We shouldn't have lost to Georgia in that fashion. Yeah, exactly. And then they came out the next season, they went undefeated and got a spot in the college football playoff. So how they respond is going to either look like 15 to 16 in a way. Again, I think this team is too talented to go 4-8.
It's about underachieving, not 4-8. It's not the direct comparison. Right. It's just a colossal underachievement. Well, for this team in next year's schedule is like 9-3.
Yep,
is what that looks like.
Absolutely.
8-4 at worse.
Yeah. Yes. So it could either look like 15 to 16 if they respond poorly, or 17 to 18 if they respond in the correct way. I think the parallels are really interesting when you start talking about.
I think 19 and 20 was kind of that way as well. And that 20 team was arguably Kelly's second best team from a culture standpoint, behind only 2012. The 19 team was way more talented than the 2020 team, but the 2020 team was better than the 2019 team. And it was about how they responded to the end of the season and the way things went down the stretch and, things like that. So I hope we see a similar response from this team and that they come out hot. The other question is that you have to ask yourself, Trevor, is will Marcus Freeman be able to fix their September problems? I know he knows that there's a problem here at Notre Dame. We have lost 3 of our 4 home openers. The only one we won was over Tennessee State. We have lost, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games. Marcus Freeman has only lost, 10 games his entire career so far at Notre Dame, right? Isn't he? What's his record now? He is a grand total of, where's his record at in this stupid thing? Here we go. He is 43-12. I count 43-11. I don't necessarily count that, but even still, 6 So football happens in basically now August, September, October, November, December, and January. So it's 6 months. I put August, September in together, and I put December and January together. And if you look at Marcus Freeman's tenure, 6 of his losses have happened in that first month of the season, which includes the end of August. So you lost your first 2 games of the 22 season, and then you lost a game in October, then one in November. You lost a game in September in 2023 to Ohio State, and then 22, October, November. And then 22 is the same way. You lost one in September, you lost one in October, you lost one in November. And then 2024, you lost a game in September and didn't lose again until January. And then this year you come out and you lose one in August and in September. So half of your losses have come in the first 4 weeks of the season. Think about that. First 4 to 5 weeks of the season. Because what was Ohio State was game 4 or 5?
5.
Let me get that. That was
in
game 5. Yeah. And because you played a game on all, so that was not even the last game of actually, so it would be the first 4 weeks of the season if you look at the college football season, because they had a week 0 game.
Yep.
So but yeah, I mean, you've lost 6 games in the first month of the season. That's got to get fixed. And it's been to good teams and bad teams. It's not like, oh, they had a brutal schedule. They lost to Miami and Texas A&M. All right, cool. They also lost to Ohio State. Yeah, but they also lost to Marshall, Ohio State twice. They also lost to Marshall in Northern Illinois at home. And that's the crazy thing. What A&M this year, Northern Illinois last year, Ohio State in 23, and then Marshall in 2024. 4 of those 6 have been at home.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about it. Marcus Freeman's 1-3 in home openers. And it would be a lie if I said that every single home opener they're hosting Ohio State, Texas, or Alabama or Georgia. That's the problem. And so I talked about this after Notre Dame got snubbed on that Sunday show that we did. Everything has to be under evaluation. And when I mean everything, I mean everything. Not just, all right, what are we doing the day of? It's like, no, what are you doing like the weeks before? Maybe you don't take your player-led leadership on a tour of New York for a week. Maybe you, and that's not a shot. Like, I know it's coming off the way, it's just frustrating in general, but everything has to be under evaluation. The player, PR stuff that you go out and do in New York. It's like maybe removing them from the team a month before the season starts isn't the correct way to go. That has to be under evaluation. Maybe it's such a tough balance that you have to find, because these are still 18 to 22-year-olds, and you don't want to start treating them like 30-year-olds that are in a business. But at the end of the day, you have to find a way to be more effective at home. That's where it starts. That's exactly where it starts. You have to find a way to be better in your first home game of the season. Your only win at home in your first home opener is against the only FCS team that Notre Dame has played in program history. That has to change. Absolutely has to change. Now, do I think it will this upcoming season, where I think they play Purdue in their first home game of the season this year after Wisconsin? Who do they play? Is it like
Purdue
Rice
or Michigan State?
Or one of those.
It's a Big Ten team, I'm pretty sure. I'm looking up right now. I thought it was Michigan State for some reason, but I could be completely wrong on that. Because they play Wisconsin first game of the season in Lambeau.
Yeah.
And then they come home that next week, and they're at, it's Rice. You're correct. It's Rice. And then it's Michigan State the next week. So it's Rice. Now, but is Rice any worse than Northern Illinois?
I was just about to say, like, am I confident they'll beat Rice? Yeah. I was also confident they were going to beat Marshall and Northern Illinois. So this team has to figure out a way.
Pretty confident they're going to beat Texas A&M.
Yeah, man. Well, the point being, this team has to figure out, Marcus Freeman has to figure out how to win the first one at home. Because every single year outside of the Tennessee State year, they've put themselves behind the 8 ball at home. And that's not a good spot to be in.
And part of that's on Pete Bavacqua, or not Pete Bavacqua, excuse me, Jack Swarbrick and Pete Bavacqua will have to fix this in the future. Why are you playing on Sunday in the first game and then having a quick turnaround in 6 days playing your first home opener? Because their game in Lambeau Field next year is on a Sunday, and then they come back and they play that next Saturday against Rice. Like, that's something that's got to be addressed as well in the future, but we won't harp on that one. But you're correct, Trevor. And you could say, well, the September schedule next year is not strong. Based on what we know right now, I don't know what kind of offseason Wisconsin's going to have. And I'll tell you something else about that Wisconsin team that at times last year was pretty terrible. I mean, you go back and watch September, Wisconsin in September and October, Trev, there were times you're like, this team is straight trash. But then I also watched this team in November, last 5-week season, go toe-to-toe with Oregon for 4 quarters, beat Washington. They were down 10-7 at halftime against Indiana on the road. They beat Illinois by 17, and then they lost a competitive game against a Minnesota team this year that won 7 games. So that was a much different team in November than it was in September. Is it one Notre Dame should win? Sure. But this is not going to be a cakewalk, and I think we've learned the last 4 years that we should never take any September games for granted with Notre Dame until they prove otherwise. So it's like, I don't have the answers. Like, guys, if I could figure it out from sitting at home and not being at but 2 practices in camp, if I could figure it out and Marcus Freeman couldn't, then he should not be coaching at Notre Dame. Like, I don't know the reason why. I don't know what to do to address it. I don't know to fix it. That's why I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. Do they practice too hard in fall camp? Do they practice not hard enough in fall camp? Do they focus too much on fundamentals and not enough on scheme? Do they focus too much on scheme and not enough on fundamentals? I don't know the answers to these. And I don't know that they are easy answers. And I don't know that you can necessarily say, okay, we've done research and we've addressed this is the reason why. That I don't know that there are those answers. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I do know those answers, because if I did know those answers, and Marcus Freeman didn't, then Notre Dame has a problem.
Yeah.
I don't know the answers. I just tell you that I can sit here and identify the problem. And for whatever reason, this team just does not come out sharp early in the season. Well, they played 2 tough teams. Well, so did Miami. Miami didn't have a warm-up game against Notre Dame. That was their first game as well. You could argue A&M's a little different because they had 2 warm-up games and Notre Dame had 1 game. Fine. But the fact of the matter is, Trevor, it's been different every time. It's been a different situation every time. And, heck, the only time they won, they were flying back from Ireland. But it helped that they were playing an FCS team at home, right? So there's all types of things you can look at. And I don't think there's one answer. I don't think there's this one tweak that Freeman can make to practice that all of a sudden fixes it. I do think there's one thing that we'll address in the offensive side of the ball. I wonder if having a quarterback coming back as a returning starter for the first time in a while might factor into that.
Sure.
Like Marcus, you know what I mean? So we'll talk about that more on the offensive side of the ball. But I think there's multiple issues. We've got to see if Coach Freeman can identify the fixes, so to speak, and really get this thing on track to where, look, I don't expect them to play their best football in September. I'd actually be a little bit concerned. Remember how good Florida State looked in September? You know what I mean? So just coming out in September and blowing everybody out doesn't necessarily mean anything. Notre Dame came out in 2023 and blew out their first few opponents and then got beat by Ohio State. So the point is, Trev, is there's a whole lot of things that they have to look at, and it may just be like look at a car. You got this big complex engine, and it's just not running right. And you take it to a mechanic, and he's going to look at it, and it could be all these different. It could be a transmission, it could be but he may look at it like, you know what? There's this one thing, and if we just tweak that thing, and now you should be good. It may just be something like that. Like you fix this one thing, but most likely it's a little thing here, little thing there, little thing there, little thing there. And you fix those things, address those things, and all of a sudden this team rolls. I do think this is a schedule that's more favorable for them to be able to turn this thing around. I will say that. With Wisconsin on neutral field, Rice at home, Michigan State at home, at Purdue, but I think some of those teams could be improved next year. I think Purdue, as long as they don't just lose everybody in the portal this offseason, is going to be better next year. I think Wisconsin's going to be better next year. I think that, Michigan State's going to be improved under Pat Fitzgerald. That team woefully underachieved this past season.
Yeah.
They're all teams that Notre Dame should beat and beat soundly if they are a locked-in football team. We'll see if they are.
This comes down to if Notre Dame is going to adjust the things that they can control. At the end of the day, they can't control what the committee does. They can control what the committee talks about, and that is well in their control. But we're talking about a team that had the third best odds to win the national championship on FanDuel before the playoff selection show came out. That has to stick with them, regardless. We talked about big picture, what could potentially motivate them. The how is going to be extremely important. It starts with being better in September. How do you be better in September? You got to start looking into big picture, what you do with your program. Then you start divvying up into the offensive and defensive and special team side of the ball, which is something that we're gearing up to talk about, folks. But before we do get there, make sure you hit your like,
I think the staff part is important too, Trev. I want to talk about that before we move on. I think one big question about the team before we move on to the offense is how much of the staff stays together. And is Marcus Freeman willing to do a true evaluation of the staff? Like, I think both of those things kind of have to go together to where you say, okay, how good are they going to be next year? Okay, tell me who they're going to lose from the staff. That's something that has to get looked at. I don't know the answer to that question. But I also think there's another level. Complacency concerns me with all things. It concerns me with Irish Breakdown. It concerns me with how I do my job. It concerns me with Notre Dame. It concerns me with how I am as a husband. Complacency is a very bad thing, in my opinion, if you're someone who has any competitiveness in you at all. And a big part of this offseason for me is, yes, you're going to have to do a good job of replacing guys that you've lost. So far, all we know is that Max Bullow's gone. I know that there's at least 2 or 3 other Notre Dame coaches getting some looks from other people. Will they go? Will they stay? I don't know. If people do go, will Marcus Freeman make good hires? There's another layer to this too, in that sometimes continuity can be a really good thing. Sometimes continuity can be complacency. And I do think there are some positions where Marcus Freeman's going to have to look at and say, okay, let's bring Joe Rudolph back next year, but we've got to address this, and this. Let's bring Chris Ash back next year, but we got to address this, and this. Let's bring, I mean, I'm just picking a coach that people that get a lot of flack. Look, love the job Mike Brown's doing here, and here, but I need you to also do this, and this. And I think that's across the board. That's individual coaches themselves looking in the mirror. Like, if I'm Marcus Freeman and I'm having my year-end meeting, I hope he does this. I don't know that he does. And I'm sitting there, I'm having sit-downs with my coaches. Let's talk about the year. They do it with players, should do it with coaches. All right, coach, how do you think things went? I want to hear from him that he recognizes the issues that I recognize. And if he doesn't, that concerns me. And then we say, okay, cool, I agree with you. We need to figure this out. How do we do that? Let's figure this out. Here's what my expectations are for you. And then insert that thing. But if you have coaches that are just like, no, I did my job, I did what I'm supposed to do, then okay. Like, well, imagine if one of your players came in and said that, hey, CJ, what do you think you got to do to get better next year? My coach, I set a school record in passer rating by a mile. What do you mean, what do I need to do to get better? I was top 5 in the country in passer rating and yards per attempt. Coach, I'm good. Do you think that Gino Guidugli and Mike Denbrock and Marcus Freeman would respond well to that answer? No, they would not. Now, A, CJ Carr would never say that. And B, they wouldn't respond well to that. Well, that should also be true for coaches. You should all be looking in the mirror, every single one of you, and this is true for every team that doesn't win the title, and say, what can I do to get better? And have a genuine conversation with yourself about, how did my unit perform? Did I have all the right people on the field? Did I have the right people in the right spots? Did I coach to my players' abilities? Did I do what I needed to do in the offseason and in season to maximize their potential? And if I didn't, then I need to figure out what I need to do to fix that. And I hope that every single assistant coach is having that conversation. Like Mike Denbrock can say, I'll use him as an example because everybody knows I'm a big Mike Denbrock supporter. But I want Mike Denbrock to look at this team and say, okay, yeah, we set a school record for points per game of 42. But I'll be willing to bet you, if I know Mike Denbrock at all, and I've been around coach for over a decade, if I know him at all, he's going to look at that 42 points per game and that 7.3 yards per play and be like, we should have been at 46. We should have been at 7.7. Like that's what competitors are going to do. Yeah, but we didn't score enough against Miami. Like, that's what the great ones do. It's, yeah, we set records here, but I want more, and we could have been more. That's the kind of coaches I want on my staff. I want Mike Mickens to sit there. And again, if you know Mike Mickens at all, you know that he's going to be like, yeah, we did this, this, and this, but man, we didn't do this, this, and this. And that's what I'm focusing on this offseason. That's what the great ones do. And I hope that Marcus Freeman has a staff like that. I hope that he is willing to challenge them, demand more of them. And if he doesn't think those coaches are willing to give him more, then find somebody who will. I don't know that there's a coach that's that way. I'm simply saying, in theory, find someone who will. Because if you're willing to dive into your roster, I get so sick of this. Coaches, they're like, hey, we got to get better at this position and that position and this position and that position. But you're then not willing to go look at your coaching staff and say, we got to get better here. We got to get better there. Well, why is it always the players that got to get better? Why is it never the coaches that got to get better? And so I hope that there's the same level of self-evaluation going on in the mirror with Notre Dame coaches as there is when they're going down their depth chart. And if they do that, starting with Marcus Freeman, then I'm confident this team is going to maximize their potential. Because the one thing I'm going to tell you, without knowing, if they don't add anybody in the portal, as long as they don't lose anybody that I'm not willing to lose, if they don't add a soul in the portal, this is one of the 5 best rosters in college football next year. If they don't add a soul, as long as they don't have a bunch of departures. You get what I'm saying? Like, if they lose 4 receivers and don't add anybody, that's different. And I mean, like,
sure.
Faison leaves, Greathouse leaves, KK leaves, CJ leaves. Like, you get what I'm saying? Like, the ones that we don't anticipate. Then this team is going to be a special team. And then if they add to the portal, then it solidifies that. So I need everybody in the program, from Marcus Freeman on down to the walk-on kickers, to look in the mirror and say, what I did this year wasn't good enough. What can I do to get better? And what can I do to make the people around me better? And if this team truly adapts that mindset, 2026 is going to be a special season, because the talent in the coaching office and the talent in the locker room is outstanding if the talent is willing to be challenged internally and externally. And that's the final piece to this is, will that happen? Don't know. But it needs to. And whether or not that happens ultimately controls all the other stuff that we talked about earlier and all the stuff we're going to talk about later. And we're going to find that. We're going to find out if that's what happened. This team can't achieve its full potential if that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, look, some of the stuff with the coaching staff is sometimes it's not even as black and white as, are you staying or leaving? Like, can I keep you or do I have to fire you? Sometimes it's not even that black and white. Sometimes it's just shuffling responsibilities. Honestly, it could be that simple. Like, if maybe on the defensive side of the ball, and all of these are speculatory, I have no idea if this is going to happen, and probably won't until I hear from Brian, at least with some of his sources. I mean, Marcus Freeman's not going to come out in a press conference and say, all right, here's everybody's new responsibilities. This person's going to do this, and this person's going to do this, and then we expect this person to do this. Those are closed door conversations. And I'm okay if I'm not a part of it, as long as I see the results yielding between August and December, January.
And if you did that in a press conference, I wouldn't care, because I don't care that you say it. I care that you do it.
Exactly. But sometimes it might be as simple as shaking up responsibilities. Again, using this as an example, maybe Joe Rudolph isn't the sole person who controls who plays where on the offensive line. Maybe Chris Ash isn't the sole person responsible for implementing this week's game plan against his team. Maybe that responsibility gets split up into 2. Maybe it should. Sometimes it's that easy.
It should have.
Yeah, agreed.
Even if he's the main coordinator, you always rely on your staff. And to your point, I don't think he did that early. And
exactly.
That's why the results were what they were.
Like, I can't buy into the fact that all of the offensive coaching staff was okay moving every single 5-star offensive tackle they got to guard. I can't believe that everybody was just like, yeah, that's cool with me too. Yeah, that's cool with me too. Yeah, I'm on board. I can't buy into that. I refuse to believe that. And maybe that's naive of me. But maybe that responsibility isn't just on one person. Maybe the responsibility of and for all I know, maybe it's not. Like, maybe it already isn't that way. But I just can't believe that they're just going to let what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and hoping for a different result. I'm hoping that Marcus Freeman doesn't take that mindset into this following offseason. It's like, yeah, I mean, shoot. It almost worked last year. We just execute a little better and, play a little harder and we'll be good. That can't be the mindset going into it. And the staff is part of that. You can have the most talented roster in the world, but if your coaching staff doesn't put them in the right positions, it's all for nothing. Florida State had a very talented roster this year. What happened to them? LSU had a very talented roster this year. What happened to them? Penn State, I said in the preseason, had a top 5 talented roster in college football. Where are they? So the coaching staff is as much, if not more so, should be evaluated this offseason into what they're doing, how they're operating, how they're developing, not just how they're recruiting. Like, you have to silo those two into 2 different jobs. It can't be like, yeah, you haven't really developed anybody, but, dude, you're bringing in a loaded class. And it's like,
all those guys are giant busts because you're not coaching them up. But, man, you're a great recruiter.
Right. It's like, man, you see all those stars you're bringing in? Okay, keep killing it, coach. Are those guys going to play? No, we got them.
We're going to go to the portal because I can't.
That's what I'm saying. So all of that has to be under evaluation, Brian. That's such a good point. It's like, it's always the players. It's always the players. And sometimes I think it's because a lot of us were brought up in the culture of like, hey, coaches do no wrong. You always listen to your coach no matter what. Always listen to your coach. And
shocker.
But
I was never that way.
Me neither. And I didn't get along really well with my head coach in high school. That is for sure. Yeah. But, I think that's part of the culture that a lot of football players were brought up in is coaches do no wrong. You always listen to your coach. And that's bled over to some people that are now in the profession. I'm hoping that Marcus Freeman kind of takes that head on and is like, okay, there's some things that have to change. Because if you just roll the ball out next season and do the exact same things and just hope that the ball rolls in your favor, which let me say this loud and clear, I don't think he's going to do. I just don't. But if he does, we have our answers.
Right.
Unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, we're not saying these things will or won't happen. That's why these are called biggest questions facing the team. How they're going to handle those things. Because like you said, you're repeating what Brian Kelly said in 2015. He literally said in a press conference, we were real close. He's talking about we were the X amount of points of being undefeated last year. And he was right. In 2015, they were a 2-point conversion attempt against Clemson on the road from tying that game and going to overtime. Well, the way that game was going, I like Notre Dame's chances in overtime. And then they go to the Stanford game and they kick what looked like a game-winning field goal with 30-some seconds left, and then the other team goes down and scores. And instead of Brian Kelly recognizing, well, the reason we lost those games is because of decisions that I made, including hiring Brian Van Gorder and keeping Brian Van Gorder, we just need to coach a little better and play a little harder. And he brought back the same exact staff the next year, and they went 4-8. So there was no self-evaluation of issues going on. You have to address those things before they become catastrophic. And that's true for every team. I mean, look, like one of the things that led to Mike Norvell's success when he did have it for 3 years was he built a culture and was willing to run guys out of town in order to build that culture. And they got to a certain point and he fixed those things, but then he lost sight of what worked for us. And look what happened to Florida State. They plummeted. Just because you're ascending and doing some good things doesn't mean that's going to stay. If you're not willing to if you don't have your finger on the pulse of your program and you get complacent. And, it's easy to get complacent when everybody loves you. Marcus Freeman was the media darling last offseason. Will he be now? I don't know the answer to that. Probably. But I hope that we see this team kind of take on a different mindset of the biggest thing is, Trev, I think this team needs to take on us against the world mindset. And in a positive way, meaning like, okay, fine. You want to screw us. You want to talk about us. You want to do this. You want to do that. Cool. Like there's some straight clowns in the media. Like I was watching a press conference with Trinidad Chambliss, and they're literally asking him about whether or not he might go to LSU with Lane Kiffin. How about we just let this freaking kid play in a playoff game first? What are you doing? Who's the loser that was talking about how Christian Gray was acting in the locker room after they lost title game? Who's that loser? Who was that? I don't even say his name because I don't even want to give him love. Dan something. He's a loser. Guy's always been a loser, still a loser. And I get it. There's a lot of idiots in the media. But it's not about like, oh, we're mad at you, so we're going to not be nice to you in interviews. I don't give a rip about that. You could do that. I know players for bad teams that aren't nice to the media. It's more so about we're going to use this to say we're going to go show everybody that we are the best team. We're going to show you what you missed out on. We're going to show you that everything you say we are, we're going to show you who we really are. And that's what I'm referring to. And if they have that mindset, then this 26 season is going to be special. If they don't, then this team will underachieve again. That's where I'm at.
Agreed completely. Folks, don't go anywhere. We're getting ready to start talking on the offensive side of the ball.
Buck's fired up too, man.
He is, man.
Buck's fired up too.
He loves talking ball. Absolutely loves talking ball, don't you? But folks, we're getting ready to transition, start talking about the questions on offense. But before we get there, be sure to hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family, anybody that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do. But as always, now that it's the offseason, the best way to stay in the now is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, in the next part of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, we're going to be talking about the questions on Notre Dame's offense. And again, quick refresher, folks, these are questions that we don't have answers to. If we had answers to them, I'd feel a lot better as of December 16th, 2025, but we don't. And there are some things that this unit, as good of some of the things as they did this year, averaged 42 points per game, 7.3 yards per play. Passing game took a big step while the run game didn't take a step back in some areas. It's really impressive. Doesn't mean that they don't have questions and things to work on moving forward. And that's ultimately where we're going to start with today's show, guys, is we're going to talk about the offense. And, Brian, you brought it up, and I think it's very well said. This is the first time they've had a returning starting quarterback since the 19-20 season, which, by the way, is just crazy to think about. But it's also the first time in Marcus Freeman's tenure as defensive coordinator or as the head coach that Notre Dame has a returning starter at quarterback. How much of a factor does that play?
I think that's a question. Like, I don't know. Is that the reason we've seen the early season struggles? Is because every year they're breaking in a new quarterback? Is that part of the reason? You had a quarterback battle in 2022, and you came out of the gate and you lost your first two games. You had a quarterback battle in 2025. You came out of the gate and you lost your first two games. In 23 and 24, you knew who your quarterback was, but he was adapting. In 24, your starting quarterback missed all of spring ball, was recovering from an injury, was getting new to his teammates, and you struggled out of the gate offensively. The 1 year that Notre Dame kind of came out of the gate really good on offense in September was the 1 year they had a guy that came in, was the guy all spring, was the guy all fall camp, and that offense came out and looked pretty good the first month of the season until the Ohio State game. And even then, there's some really good things in that game. You had a lot of missed opportunities. Like your O-line blocked well that game. That was, you could argue, as a play calling issue as much as it was, some players not doing some things in that game. I don't think that's a coincidence, Trevor. I don't. Well, now you're going into 2025 or 2026, and you've got a returning starter quarterback playing in the same system that he played in. And I think that's something that's going to be very interesting because even from 19 to 20, you could argue the offense took a step back in 2020. Why? They had a returning starting quarterback, but they were in a new system because they had fired Chip Long, still don't agree with, and then hired Tommy Rees. So this is a unique situation. Having a returning quarterback doesn't always mean things are going to go well either, because they had a returning starter in 2016, and we saw how that went. The difference here is there was a quarterback battle in that offseason. Deshaun Kaiser wasn't the unquestioned starter. In fact, there was a lot of people in the locker room that didn't want him to start. At least that's what I was told, because of, was he as bought in? Was he the leader? Was he the player that Malik Zaire was? There's a lot of people that felt Malik got unfairly treated by the coaches, especially Brian Kelly, because, he was the guy and he got hurt. You're not supposed to lose your job. I mean, there's a lot of drama that offseason. It wasn't just because of the quarterback.
Yeah.
The point is I want to see how this offense looks with that. Like you have CJ Carr learning to throw to certain players he hadn't thrown to a whole lot. We talked about how, does he have the same rapport with Jaden Greathouse that maybe he has with somebody else? We don't know that because we haven't seen these guys together. Same thing with Riley Leonard. Same thing with Sam Hartman. New quarterback with new players. As long as Jaden Greathouse comes back next year, it's going to be CJ Carr throwing to a bunch of dudes he's been throwing to now for 2 years. Like I can't believe that that's just going to not have any impact whatsoever on September. I can't. I have to think it's going to have an impact. And especially since it's now a situation where that's your guy. Kenny's transferring. I wish Kenny would have come back, but I also 100% support Kenny leaving because this is his one chance to be a starter. I believe Kenny's going to be graduating in May. And I supported as much as I'd love to have him back. I support his decision to leave, just like I would have liked of Steve Angeli to come back, but I supported his decision to leave because CJ's the guy. I have to think that this is going to be a situation where having a starting quarterback is going to have a positive impact, but it's a question because it's not always a given. When we saw LSU take a step back with a returning starting quarterback this year. I mean, we've seen it in college football. I don't know how Marcus Freeman's team responds to having a returning starting quarterback because we've never seen it before. So it's like, while I'm optimistic about it, I mean, Trev, you and I were talking. I'm beyond optimistic about it. It's still a question mark to see how it actually goes down.
From a production standpoint, I'm very confident. The biggest question is how does Freeman manage it? One thing that I picked up on this season that I started to see is there was a lot of overcorrection this season. Big picture and kind of minute details. One of the overcorrections, hey, Jeremiah Love didn't get the ball enough against Miami. What'd you do the next week? Let him touch the ball 30 times. It's like, okay, what's the what's the in between?
Right, and it got your offense a little bit out of rhythm at times. Like,
exactly.
You come out early and you're throwing the ball all over A&M, but then you're just like, okay, let's pound the rock. I thought we talked about this. That was an issue I thought they had against NC State.
Yeah.
I thought they were just forcing the issue when NC State was like daring you to throw the football. And they just kept pounding it. And then the second half, they came out, threw the football a lot, and CJ goes off. That's a great observation, Trevor, is like when you have a great player like that, I get where they're coming from.
Yep.
But I think the overcorrection thing is spot on. Please continue. My interruptions, but I just get fired up when you say things like that. I get fired up, and I just want to talk about it. But please
I love
continue.
it, man. I love a fired up BD. I'm here for that every single day. But look, guys, the biggest thing that I'm concerned with, and the biggest question for me when I look at this is how does Freeman handle this from like a load management type of deal? How much does he put on CJ Carr? Does he get overconfident in the fact that it's like, hey, he was in the system last year. Now he's going to be a team captain. We're going to have him calling different plays at the line. Like we're gearing him up to be NFL ready. It's like, hey, there are still fundamental things that CJ Carr has to work on. Let's not forget that earlier this season, he had to fix a footwork problem because he was staggered every single time that they were going to throw it, and his feet were parallel every single time they ran it, or one of the combination of the two. There are still things that he has to work on. He is still a young quarterback. He has 12 starts under his belt. He played exceptionally well for a redshirt freshman and far surpassed my expectations early of what I thought he was going to look like. How does Freeman manage that piece? Because we started to see, hey, like you gave him a little bit too much at times and not enough at other times throughout this season. Do you overcorrect now and have too much confidence? And it's also a healthy question for like, is it possible to have too much confidence in CJ Carr? Depending on the subject, yes, it is. Like I'm with you, Brian. I gotta believe that even if, like, depending on what happens with Faison and Greathouse, he's still going to be thrown with guys that he's been thrown to for years. Cam Williams will be asked to step up. Micah Gilbert will be asked to step up. I mean, he threw his first career touchdown pass to Micah Gilbert. Didn't look at him while he did it, but he did it. So that's my biggest question with how Freeman handles this, with how Mike Denbrock handles this. And I think Denbrock, he was asked about it multiple times about CJ throughout the offseason and then multiple times in season. It's like, how do you manage a quarterback like CJ Carr that sees the field so well, that understands the offense so well? And Mike Denbrock on multiple occasions had to be like, hey, sometimes we had to pull the reins back a little bit. Like sometimes we had to let him know it's like, hey, like not yet. We're not there yet. And I'm very curious to see, okay, is his development combined with how the staff views him, is that going to give him the green light to like, okay, now we're ready. Let's go and unleash this thing full bore. Because I think at times we started to see that. We saw it against Navy. At times we saw it. I mean, we definitely saw it against Arkansas. So that's my biggest question with how CJ gets handled. But I don't have a whole lot of questions. Sounds like you're in the same boat about what the production is going to look like with him coming back.
Yeah, and what it should be.
Sure.
Like, I don't have questions about, is CJ going to work hard this offseason? I don't have any questions about that. I don't have any questions about, can he handle the full scope of the offense? I really don't. It's just about, what will it look like? Will they be able to build around it? Will the things that happened around him be such that this team is able to keep rolling? So, as I mentioned earlier, yes, I think year 2 of CJ Carr could be special, but if they lose, I keep saying this, and I'm just using it because, like, we don't know. We haven't heard from Jaden Greathouse about one way or the other. I mean, so, like, we can assume he's going to come back. I don't know he's going to come back. I don't know that Jordan Faison's going to. I mean, we don't know this because they haven't re-signed, which I think is super lame. But the point is like, the rumors are out there, and we haven't talked to these kids about it. So it's like, I'm saying, as long as they come back. But what if somebody leaves? What if somebody gets hurt? What if there's a bunch of losses on the offensive line? Like, what if they're like, hey, we can't afford these 3 starting offensive linemen, so we're going to start over from scratch? That's what you want to have in front of. I don't know the answers to all those things. And so that's the thing, is like, I think having CJ Carr back in year 2 could be special if the pieces around him remain as good as I think they're going to be. And that's part of it too. But I think if they handle it properly, like, he's now your guy you're building your offense, running your offense through. This year it was Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. That's who you were running your offense through. Now it's like, okay, who's it going to be now? It's going to be CJ Carr. Well, what does a Marcus Freeman offense look like? Run through a quarterback as a thrower. We don't know the answer to that. You know what I mean? So we know what an offense looks like, run through a quarterback that can run. We don't know the other way around. And so that's what I'm looking forward to is and that's where my fingers are crossed. Like, God, I just want there to be some release saying, hey, I'm excited about 26 from several players. I want to see Billy Schrouth come out and say, hey, can't wait for 2026 in Notre Dame. I want to see Jaden Greathouse and say, yeah, I can't wait for 2026 in Notre Dame. Like, I want to see those things because I feel like if all those pieces come back, this offense has a chance to be special. And we're talking about an offense, Trevor, that just set a modern-day program record in points per game and set a modern program record in yards per play. Modern meaning since World War II. You know what I mean? Like, the last team to score more points in a season than Notre Dame's 2025 offense, I think, was 1913. You know what I mean? When Newt Rockne was a player. That's kind of where I'm at. That's where I'm at. So I just want to see that. Because I think this offense could be really special next year if all the pieces come back and if they properly build around an experienced quarterback. And that's kind of, to me, the biggest question is right there. What does this team look like with a returning starting quarterback? We haven't seen it under Marcus Freeman. Last time Notre Dame had a quarterback coming back, they, played in the ACC championship, made the college football playoff, but it didn't end great.
Yeah.
I think this team has a whole lot more talent than that team did, though. Whole lot more talent.
I do too. And you brought up one of the other questions that we do have here, Brian. It is who returns. You mentioned Jaden Greathouse. That's kind of the obvious one. You mentioned the offensive line because there are some question marks there, like we talked about in yesterday's show. We talked about the transfer portal. We talked a little bit about the salary cap and what this means. Roster management has a whole new definition in college football going into the 2026 season than it did going into the 2025 season. Who comes back at running back? What does that look like? Because it's not as simple. Look, I'm as high on this Notre Dame running back room as the next person. Fact of the matter is they don't have a Jeremiah Love in that room right now. I don't know if they have another Jadarian Price in that room right now, albeit they're still extremely talented. But some of my outlook on the running back room is going to depend on, okay, who comes back? What is Kedron? What's the state of Kedron Young right now?
Right.
What does Aeneas Williams decide to do?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like how much of a role is Nolan James gonna take on? What does Jabron Payne do? And then how much emphasis does Juwan Sider and Mike Denbrock and Marcus Freeman want to put on the weight of Javian Osborne and Jonas Walton as true freshmen? So a lot of different. It's weird. Going into this season, we talked all about, what's the quarterback position going to look like? We feel like it's going to be good regardless of who they go with. But what we do know is they're going to have an insane run game, and they have the best running back duo in the country to kind of back them up. This year, it's like, hey, CJ's coming back. He had a great redshirt freshman season. I think he's one of, if not the best returning quarterbacks in the country coming into next season. But what does the running back room look like now?
Mm-hmm.
Talented, we just don't know what that's going to look like. I think that's a very fascinating discussion.
The good news for Notre Dame is, no, they don't have a Jeremiah Love coming back next year. But you know who else doesn't have a Jeremiah Love type of player coming back next year? Every other team in college football.
That's right.
But you also can't sniff at losing those two players. And then here's a question too, Trevor. When I look at it, was the run game as good as it was the last 2 years because of the talent of the running backs or because of the offensive line, or both? My concern, and we'll address this here in a little bit, is I think at times the running backs made the offensive line look better than it was. And as good as Aeneas Williams is, as good as Kedron Young is, as good as Javian Osborne is, as good as Jonas Walton is, as good as Nolan James Jr. is, in whatever order you want to put those guys, they're not Jeremiah Love. You know what I mean? Like, you can't expect them to get tackled behind the line of scrimmage against Navy, spin off of it, and go for 40-something yard touchdown. Like, you can't do that. And so, but we said yesterday, if everybody comes back that we want to come back, the running back room is going to be fine. If you compare it to the rest of college football, because here's what we're going to have to do at Notre Dame, amongst Notre Dame fans. We can't spend the entire offseason comparing Aeneas Williams, Kedron Young, Nolan James Jr., Javian Osborne, and Jonas Walton to Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. It's about comparing them to the rest of college football. And if we remember, we went into 2024, Trev, and you and I said, listen, I know that they lost Audric Estime, and I know he's a dude, but I think they're going to be fine because they've got these kids coming in, Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, who are going to now step into full-time roles and be pretty good football players. And they were even better at running back the last 2 years than they were with Audric. I'm not saying they're going to be that, but it's not so much. They don't have to be as good as Jeremiah and Jadarian were. They just have to play to their ability. And then how does that stack up against the rest of college football? That's the question. I feel the same thing about wide receiver. If Jordan Faison is healthy and comes back next season, and again, when I say that, I don't anticipate Jordan Faison doing anything other than coming back after lacrosse. If Jaden Greathouse comes back, if Cam Williams comes back, if Micah Gilbert comes back, if KK comes back, if Elijah Gurs comes back, then I think this receiver room has a chance to be really, really good. And if they can add one guy from the portal, especially a boundary guy that can push, then it becomes even better. So it's like who comes back on the offensive line? If they just lose one guy, I'm okay. They lose two guys, okay, yeah, but that guy was injured, so okay. They lose three guys, like, okay, now I'm worried. So those are the things that we have to find out too, Trevor, is who's going to even come back for this team on offense. And it's not a big list of guys, but it's an important list of guys. And if they do that, if they come back, then I think it's going to be pretty good and pretty dynamic. But we have to see that. And then, who they in the portal, that's another question that we have to address, is who do they go in the portal? We don't need to rehash that, Trev. We talked yesterday about what the portal needs are. That's also dependent upon who comes back. But then the other thing, too, is here's a big piece for me. Here's a big question for next year. Will the development of the young players at wide receiver and the offensive line be better than it was this season in the last few seasons? That's a big thing for me. Because Notre Dame's not going to go to the portal for an offensive lineman. I don't believe, nor should they. Especially when I've gotten text messages from people, and some of the numbers I'm hearing being thrown out to offensive linemen who aren't even in the portal yet, not just at Notre Dame, but other schools, is like 7-figure deals for 1 year from an offensive lineman. And what's happening right now is O-line development is so bad that teams are willing to overpay for offensive linemen who have been developed somewhere else, which for Notre Dame is going to put a great onus on Joe Rudolph to say, okay, I got to make sure that I coach up Gerby Lambert and Will Black and, Joe Odding, and continue to coach up Anthony Knapp and Sullivan Absher and guys like that, Matty Augustine, Owen Strebig. I mean, all the guys that are going to be Cam Heron. I don't just leave people out, but like, if we do lose some guys, can we get these guys coached up and ready to play at a higher level than what we saw last year? Because I think that Notre Dame has thrived on talent up front the last couple of years. I don't know that the scheme in the run game and that the coaching has always been as elite as it needs to be. Has it been good? Yes. Has it been elite? No. Same thing at wide receiver. Has Mike Brown done a good job the last 2 years? Yes. Can he do a better job? Absolutely. Especially with the younger players. And if we can see that, like, guys, hey, how much would you love for Notre Dame to go out this season and add to their current receiver rotation a 6'2", 205-pound, explosive, athletic, strong wide receiver? Sounds good, right? I know where to find one. I believe he's over, on campus right now, probably getting ready for a class. His name's Cam Williams. Coach him up. Coach up Micah Gilbert. Coach up KK. Coach up Elijah Burris. Because they're going to be cheaper than somebody getting the portal. They're just not as experienced or developed. So then what are you paying Mike Brown to do? Do that. Demand that. And if Coach Brown can do that, and I think he's capable of it, he's more than capable of it, then I think that you don't necessarily need to go to the portal again for a bunch of guys. Coach up the guys you have. Because I think if they do that, then I think this offense, even with the guys that are here, that's what I said, if everybody comes back that we want to come back, I don't think they need to go to the portal for anybody on offense. If they're committed to development. If they're not committed to development, then you need to go get a receiver. You need to go get a Nick Marsh type of guy. And at some point in time, Trev, there's like, look, I love this kid as much as the next guy, but if X player jumps in the portal, then and he wants to come to Notre Dame, you kind of got to do what you got to do. So that's kind of where I'm at with that is, will the development improve?
Yeah, and will it? And the other part of that is it has to. Like, I had talked about this yesterday about the wide receiver. I'll just come right out and say it. The wide receiver position and the wide receiver position coach I'm evaluating with a magnifying glass in this offseason. I am. Because, look, at the end of the day, you can't just continue to rely on multiple transfer portal wide receivers who are, Malachi Fields is the best of them, and all of the other ones were just kind of okay, with all due respect to some of the other transfer portal receivers. You're not going to convince me from a skill standpoint that Cam Williams wasn't a better athlete or a better physical prospect than what Will Pauling was, than what Chris Mitchell was, than what Jaden Harrison was, with all due respect to some of those guys. Notre Dame has 14 scholarship wide receivers right now. 11 of them have sophomore or younger years of eligibility left. And you can't talk to me about, experience. You can't talk, they're just not experienced. It's like, well, to get experience, you got to put them in the game. Well, I haven't put them in the game yet because they haven't done this. It's like all 11 of them?
Right.
Like that's a coaching thing. You have the pieces. You got to make sure. Now, the caveat to all of that is like what Brian said. If there is that talent in the portal that jumps in the portal, you would do your team a disservice by not going after them. But you have the pieces. You have the pieces. All the stuff and all the names that I've heard floating around, the Nick Marshes and the Cam Colemans, they have experience.
Cam Coleman even in the portal?
No, I've just heard his name floated around of like kind of like the Christmas list type of thing of the wish list, I guess you could call it. But the one thing that they have on guys like Cam Williams is experience. You know what I mean? But outside of like physically, we're splitting hairs. This guy's 6'2.5". Cam Williams is 6'2". This guy's 210. Cam's like 205. Like it's stuff like that. Develop the people that you have in the room. And I honestly think that would go light years ahead of where because the room is talented, man. But the wide receiver position going into 2026, I would argue on the entire team has the biggest room for variance. And we're going to get our answer here for what that's going to look like in the coming weeks. If they go out and they just get a big body boundary receiver, like a 6'3", 6'4" guy, I get that. I think that you have a boundary receiver, couple boundary receivers on the roster. But if you had different ideas for them, I can live with that. If they go out and they get a boundary receiver and a field receiver and a slot receiver / gadget guy again, I'm gonna have a lot of questions for the type of development that's going on, because in this day and age of college football, you would be naive in thinking that all 11 of those young guys are just going to sit and wait around until their redshirt senior year to finally get their opportunity, because they're going to go somewhere else and get that experience.
I'm just going to come out and say it right now. If you can't build a big-time receiving core with Jordan Faison, Jaden Greathouse, Cam Williams, Micah Gilbert, KK Smith, Elijah Burris, Logan Saldate, Caden Finley, Scrap Richardson, Jerome Bettis Jr. even, who's like the 10th of the guys that I just mentioned. And then didn't mean to say Caden Finley yet. And then you add Caden Finley, Bubba Frazier, who I just watched in the state semifinals the other day, Braden Robinson, Devin Fitzgerald, and Dylan Faison. If you can't put together a really good 5 to 6 man rotation from that group, I have to question your leadership on offense when it comes to that position, from a recruiting standpoint and from a development standpoint. I think Mike Brown's capable of absolutely developing that room. I 100% believe that. I do. I think Mike Brown does some really good things at Notre Dame. This isn't even saying he can't do that, won't do that. It's just saying there's too much talent already on campus for me to think that you have to go to the portal to get a big-time receiver. If there's the right guy out there, I'm not saying no to Nick Marsh. He's a really good player. He's as good as some of those guys, but more experienced. But what I'm telling you is you don't need to go outside to put together a really good room if you have the right kind of leadership in the locker room and in the coaching position. I just don't think you do. And
Agreed.
I've seen enough from Mike Brown to say, if Marcus Freeman and Mike Denbrock were willing to demand from him, hey, bro, this is what I want from you. I need you to get at least 6 kids ready to play for us next year. We're not going to go to the portal, or we're just only going to get this one. But you have 3 things to do. You need to get that guy ready, that guy ready, that guy ready. One of them has to be Cam Williams. Look, yeah, but he doesn't do that. I don't care what he doesn't do. That's your pet project. That's where you show that you're one of the best in the business, is by getting that kid ready to play. Because here's the reality. There aren't many kids in the portal that have more God-given ability than that kid. Coach them up. Push them. And then also do the same with Micah Gilbert. Do the same with Caden Finley. Between the 3 of them, you got to be able to get – if you can't get 2 of Micah Gilbert, Cam Williams, and Caden Finley ready to be good players next year, then I don't know that you have the right leadership there. I'm talking guys that have the potential boundary. That's my thing.
Agreed.
That's my deal. It's too
now,
much.
some of this also
same thing at tight end, Trev. It's same thing at tight end. Real quick, you got Cooper Flanagan, James Flanagan, Jack Larson, Ty Washington, Ian Premer, Preston Frizzell on your roster. If you have to go to the portal to have good tight end play next year, then you don't have good coaching. I think they do have good coaching. That's why I don't think they're going to go to the portal at tight end. If maybe except for like depth, and that's where I'm at. Like CJ Carr's got plenty of really good weapons on campus right now. Is Jaden Greathouse good enough to win a title? I don't know. Go watch the Orange Bowl in the championship game last year. You tell me. Can Jordan Faison be that guy against good teams? I don't know. You go watch the Sugar Bowl last year. You tell me. You go watch the Indiana guys try to cover Jordan Faison last year. You tell me if those guys are those guys. That's where I'm at.
100%.
But does the staff believe that? That's the question. That's where we get down.
That's $1 million question, man. I agree. And some of that kind of snowballs into who steps up as the new playmakers. We just listed off a laundry list of people in the last 20 minutes of who that could be, but we can't say for certain. Every single year that there's some guy that's like, hey, I'm confident that this guy's going to have a big year. Sometimes it comes to fruition, and other times I get disappointed. Who is going to be those playmakers on offense? Because the reality is you're not going to have Malachi Fields. You're not going to have Eli Raridan. You're not going to have Jeremiah Love, and you're probably not going to have Jadarian Price. And those were kind of your 4 big skilled guys last year. Jordan Faison's absolutely in that conversation. He's most likely coming back. But those are your 4 big weapons on offense that were either moving the ball or putting the ball in the end zone. Who steps up? It's a huge question. Every year, like I said about tight end, every year somebody steps up at tight end that wasn't really the premier guy the season before, but still doesn't mean it's not a question. Will that trend continue? I don't know. We just don't know.
And I think another thing, and we'll tie this in with all of this, I think another thing is with the talent you have, with guys being more experienced, you're going into year 3 of Mike Denbrock's offense. I think that we're at a point now where it's time to take another jump from a volume of your pass game standpoint. I understand why Mike Denbrock did not have as deep of a playbook as maybe I would have liked this year. You've got a redshirt freshman quarterback. You have a thin receiving core based on who you trust. You've got an offensive line that came out of the gate struggling, so it takes a while to get that trust back. And by the way, you have the best 1-2 punch at running back in all of college football. But you're now going into year 3 now. You know, you're going into year 2 of CJ Carr being the starter, year 3 of him running the offense. I do want to see them enhance the pass game. It doesn't mean add 75 new concepts, but I want to see them do more things next year that are designed to get guys running. I want to see them do more things next year that are designed to create issues for the defense, not just with the play action, but, move the pocket, do some things where you're trying to, sneak guys open. You don't need to do that a bunch of times, but you do that a little bit. I want to see them do more things where they move the receivers around. Don't just have Jordan Faison in one spot all the time. Don't just have Jaden Greathouse in one spot all the time. Don't just have your boundary in one spot most of the time. I think those are things that you can do to enhance the offense that I think are necessary, that are going to make this pass game more effective, because the numbers from the pass game look great in a lot of instances, but I think they struggled down the stretch as teams got more film on them. If you look at CJ Carr's numbers in the last month of the season, they weren't nearly as good as they were at the beginning of the season. He was at 6.6, 5.4, and 7.6 yards per pass attempt down the stretch. The teams kind of got a beat on it, and you didn't have any other answers. People started to sit on certain routes because you didn't have a whole lot else. I don't think you need to add 75 new wrinkles. Give me some vertical stretch stuff. Give me some floods. Give me some mesh. Give me some stuff where you're just giving different complementary stuff to what you do. Do some post-snap switch stuff. Do a little bit more bunch like you did the year before. I think there's some things they can do schematically to enhance the pass game as well. I think I think the same thing with the run game. Will Joe Rudolph do a better job of designing the run game this year than he did last year? That's a big question for me. There were times that I thought his run game was like super great. Like, man, this is a really good, well-designed run game. Go back and look at the Arkansas game. And then there's sometimes I'm like, did they practice more than 2 plays this week? I don't know that they did, because they just keep running the same play over again, and not because it's dominating. It's not like you ran mid-zone 17 times because you averaged 9 yards on it because they couldn't stop it. Like, it was like they're just running the same thing and it's not really working. You know what I mean? Like that's part of it. And I think this kind of all, like, will the run game thrive in the post Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, Riley Leonard era? I think that's a huge question, Trevor. But the question is not going to be answered by who you have at quarterback or you have at running back. The question is going to be answered by what do we see from a growth standpoint up front. I think that's the last biggest question for me when I look at the offense is, will the offensive line – it's really 3 parts to me, and I'm going to kick it to you on these. 1, can it finally stay healthy? That's a big one. More than half of well over half of the last 2 years, we've seen this team play without the expected starting offensive line because of injuries. Not just Jagasol, but Craig goes down game 3 last year, halfway point this year. Strouth goes down in game 3 last year, comes back in game 7 or 8. He goes down this year in game 7. We saw, Charles Jagasol get hurt last year. Got hurt again this year. Can they stay healthy? Number 1. Why does this keep happening? It just could be bad luck. But you at least have to ask the question, why does this keep happening here? And you may just look at him like, dude, these are all guys getting rolled up on injuries. How do you blame Lauren Lando for what happened to Charles Jagasol this year? You don't. You know what I mean? Like, had you done different exercises, maybe his arm doesn't bend that way when he wrecks a vehicle. You know what I'm saying? But like, some of it's bad luck, but are there things that you can address? I don't know the answer to that. I'm saying those are all things you should look at, and it may just be like, look, bad luck. But can they stay healthy? Will Rudolph Joe Rudolph do a better job of actually putting the right 5-man combination together in the right places? And can he finally develop an elite offensive line? He hasn't done that yet. Those are the three big questions for me for the offensive line.
I mean, the third question is going to get answered if the first two get accomplished. If Joe Rudolph puts the right 5, I think that's where we have to start with point number 2. If it's the right 5, because look, there's a chance that Ashton Craig doesn't come back. There's a chance Billy Schrauth doesn't come back. And there's a good chance that Emil Wagner doesn't come back. We've talked about that on the show before. Why? Because the athletic director talked about it. Okay. So there is a chance that there's 3 openings on the offensive line this year. That is not something that they had going into this season. So now more than ever, this is a different conversation than last year. Going into last season, we could spitball ideas of, hey, Anthony Knapp projects best here, and maybe this guy projects best here. But, I mean, fact of the matter was you were going to start Charles Jagus on, Billy Schrauth on the inside. Your 2 tackle spots were locked down, and Ashton Craig was healthy. He's starting at center. That was really the MO going into last offseason. This offseason, however, because of the changes, what do? I know we say it jokingly, but they did move their best tackle prospects to guard. What happens if one of the tackle spots opens up? What do? How do you kick off the offseason? Do you just make the adamant decision now that, okay, Will Black and Kirby Lambert are exclusively taking reps on the outside? Is that what you do? Do you bump Jags back outside? Now that you have openings along the interior, is that what then motivates you to move Knapp inside? I don't know. Those are all questions. Health, yes. Will they stay healthy? That's just going to be a question ongoing that won't even be answered throughout this offseason. That's going to be just a week-by-week evaluation tool of, okay, they made it through this week healthy because now I have way too much PTSD about Notre Dame's offensive line staying healthy. And so the second question is so important, especially because what could come open along the offensive line. And it's 2 parts. Will he put the right 5 out there? And then will he put the right 5 out there in the best spots? That's the biggest thing. Because like you could say Will Black is your best starting offensive lineman, but if you put him at center, that's not really doing you a service. Now, do I think he's going to put him at center? No, I don't.
You could say that Billy Schrauth is your best offensive lineman. I think you and I would agree on that. But if you put him at left tackle, he's not your best offensive lineman. Right? Like, it's the same thing in reverse with Anthony Knapp. I think Anthony Knapp had a heck of a year this year. This is not us beating the drumbeat of, I can't believe Anthony Knapp's still starting. There are people that will make that argument, not us. But it's like, okay, if he's a really good left tackle, well, what if he could be an elite guard or an elite center? Isn't that better than a pretty good tackle? When you have somebody else who can also be a pretty good tackle, if you give him the opportunity. You see what I'm saying? Like, this thing, it's not just about, oh, this guy's not good, he shouldn't be starting. Anthony Knapp absolutely should be starting for Notre Dame. I'm shocked he hasn't gotten some honorable mention discussion or All-American discussion. Yeah, honestly, I am. And I'll just reveal a little insight. I made a pitch to one of the All-America groups that I think he should be an All-American. I made a pitch for Love, Price, Moore, and then Drake Bowen and Anthony Knapp. You know, I thought he played like a second-team All-American this year. But I think he could eventually be like the best center or, you know, in college football. You know, or if Ashton Craig's back and healthy, then maybe the best guard. So I think that's what we get to. Like, I think Kirby Lambert could be an outstanding guard, but I think he could be really special at right tackle. You know what I mean? Like, that's just my opinion. So those are the things you look at and say, and besides, Joe Rudolph, you told us that you already know Will Black can play left tackle, so there's no reason not to put him back out there in spring. You know, but that's where some being bold. And, you know, like you say, well, he's established himself a left tackle. Well, Alabama won back-to-back titles in 2011 and 2012. Do you remember Barrett Jones did not start at the same position on both of those teams? Barrett Jones, who was an All-American at Alabama, was a All-American. I think he was an All-American tackle. I'm actually looking it up right now. I believe he was an All-American tackle. And then, okay, here we go. So Jones started 14. He won 3 titles, all 14 games for Alabama's 2009 national championship team at right guard, earned freshman All-Americans. In his junior season, because of needs, he switched from guard to left tackle and started all 13 games for another Alabama championship team and was first team all SEC. And then I believe in 2012 moved to center. So, yeah, he won 3 championships at Alabama and started at 3 different positions on those teams. He won the Remington Trophy as the best center in college football in 2012. The first year he ever played it. I mean, so don't tell me, well, he's established here. So this isn't about, okay, you've got that. It's about putting the best 5 on the field. Can Joe Rudolph, for the first time in his Notre Dame career, put the best 5 on the field? Because I don't think he's done that yet. We talked about this in 2022 or 2023. Billy Schrauth should have been playing much earlier in the season. We complained about it all year. Then Billy Schrauth gets put in the lineup and they start running on people. You know, we talked about it next year. Why are you starting Anthony Knapp at left tackle next to a redshirt freshman in Sam Pendleton? Why don't you have Sam Pendleton at right guard and Billy Schrauth at left guard so you have a veteran next to Anthony Knapp, not another guy who's never played a meaningful down of football? You know, why isn't Rocco Spindler in the start? You know, we've had these questions every year with him, and it gets frustrating. People say, well, Anthony Knapp, you know, Gerby Lambert was banged up in the spring, but he was playing guard in the spring and right tackle in the spring, not left tackle. So that's the frustration. And I think that's what's going to ultimately determine whether or not Joe Rudolph can build a Joe Moore awarding winning offensive line. The fact that they weren't a finalist this year, were they even a semifinalist this year?
No.
It's not a good look.
Not at O-line U.
Nope.
Definitely not a good look. I agree completely. And that's a huge question. It all starts up front. I'm with you. But folks, that is going to do it for part 3 of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. We're getting ready to wrap up today's show with a mailbag. We have some questions already in there. But before we get there, hit that like, hit that subscribe. Also, make sure you're subscribed to the CFB Nation channel. I know it's the offseason, but Bill Bender and Bill Trocchi were live earlier this morning with the playoffs coming right around the corner. They're also going to be cranking out some more content on there as well. Whatever streaming platform you listen to us on, we would greatly appreciate a 5-star review. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, to wrap up today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, we have a mailbag to take us home. Now, as you guys know, for our mailbags, put a little MB for mailbag or a little mailbox emoji that lets us know to set the question aside. Fact of the matter is we can't go forever. So if you want to make sure that you get your question answered, we do also have a mailbag. We're going to go for about an hour
Friday. Now. So we're going to try to give you all a good hour as long as there's enough questions.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yep. But
definitely want to make sure it gets answered. Throw a super chat in there.
Exactly. So, Brian, without further ado, let's get this thing off, man. From Ghost of ND, do you think the coaching staff will make the proper adjustments to play better against Miami in general during the season? I see the Miami game as a must-win for a CFP resume next year.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, do I think they'll make the proper adjustments to beat Miami in November? I do. It's November. I'm not worried about November with this coaching staff. I mean, they've earned my trust to be ready to play that game on November 7th. They've earned my trust that they'll be ready to play that game. Like, they haven't lost a November game since, Clemson 2023? I believe Marcus Freeman only has they lost in November against USC in his first year.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And I believe those are the only 2 November losses that Marcus Freeman has had. Is that because the Louisville game in 2022 was October. And the Stanford loss in 2023, the Stanford loss in 2022 was in October. So they lost to number 6 USC on the road in his first year. They lost at Clemson by 8 in his second year. And that was the first month of November. Since that time, their next 2 November games, they won by 38 and 33. In 2024, they won their November games by 49-21 in a game where the other team scored the last 2 touchdowns, 35 and then 14 in November. And then this year in November, they were pretty darn good in this month and this year in November as well. They won their November games 25-10. It's their worst November game is a 15-point win. 39 over a ranked team, 22 over a ranked team, 63-point win over a P5 team, and then 29. I'm not worried about November. I'm worried about September, October. Getting to the point where when you like Marcus Freeman has proven he knows how to get a team to be playing their peak football at the end of the season. That we know. How can he get them prepared to play better in September and October without sacrificing what they're doing in November? So I'm not worried about the Miami game on November 7th. Miami State may still be the better team. I don't know. We'll see how the offseason goes. But what I'm saying is I'm not worried about them being able to play better against Miami. They played like poo this year against Miami, and Miami played probably their best game of the year. Notre Dame lost by 3. So that game I'm not as worried about. That's not a shot at Miami. It's just track record is that Notre Dame plays pretty good football in November.
Yeah.
It's the September games I'm more concerned about.
I mean, what's even crazier about the back half of your question here, Ghost, is will the Miami game likely be a must-win game for the CFP resume? Most likely. I thought that about Florida State last year at this time. I mean, it's just crazy. Like with this day and age of college football, you just never know. Odds are it likely will be. Miami is going to be one of their better teams or one of the better teams on their schedule next year as it stands today. But even that's not a given, which I just think is crazy. But yeah, I'm not concerned about November in the slightest. From Wade Garrett, with Kingston being out possibly for a bit next season, is Snead a priority to try and bring back? Is he even eligible?
He is eligible. He redshirted in 2022. So he is eligible to come back next season. If Jalen Snead wants to come back next season, I have no problem bringing him back next season. He's a good football player. I just don't think it's if you and I don't know what the staff feels about bringing him back. I have no idea. I'm just giving you my opinion. If you felt like it was time to move on from him, or you felt like maybe he would be better somewhere else, I don't know that Kingston's injury changes that dynamic for me. If you felt you wanted him back already, then certainly you continue to fight to keep him back. For me personally, I don't think Kingston's injury changes that a whole lot. And the reason why is he'll eventually be back. You know, I mean, he'll be back at the latest. If he's out a year, which is not how ACLs are anymore, he's back in November. And then you've got a long playoff run. Most likely he's back sometime in September. You know, the way that ACLs go as far as like getting back to like full speed kind of thing. I mean, Mitchell Evans tore his ACL in November in 23, and he was back in fall camp and started the first game, you know, for Notre Dame. Now, he wasn't 100%, and I would be patient with Kingston. But I've got Drake Bowen coming back. I've got Jaden Alsbury coming back. I've got Madden Framo coming back. You know, you've got guys like Bodie Cahoon ready to go into year 3. You've got Teddy Rizak ready to go into year 3. You've got Anthony Saka going into year 2. You know, you've got Kahanu Kia who could, you know, maybe help you in part of your depth rotation. You got plenty of talent at linebacker. You know, I'm not overpaying to keep Jalen Snead. If Jalen Snead wants to stay here, you absolutely keep him. He's a good football player. But if I've got to get into a bidding war to keep him from going, then I wouldn't let him go because I think you're pretty good at linebacker, even if he can't go. Because as I said, Kingston will be back at some point in time. And that's kind of my thing. I just don't know if his injury would change anything for me one way or the other. And this isn't even about do I want Jalen Snead back. It's more about if he's looking at leaving and you've got to kind of talk him into staying, it's going to cost you. And I just don't know that that's where I'm committing my financial resources for next season.
Same page. From Ballpeen Shillelagh, not every championship team needs a superstar, but it sure helps. Who are 2 guys on offense and 2 guys on defense who could develop in the offseason to be a J-Love type of superstar next year?
I don't know that you're good. I mean, okay, so when I think of J-Love superstar, there's 2 types of ways to look at it. One is playmaking ability. I don't know that anyone's going to be the playmaker that he was. The other is All-American, Heisman contender. That's CJ Carr. That's who that guy is. That's the put the team on your shoulders player. It's just going to look very differently. I think what excites me about what the offense could be next year is if they develop players correctly. You don't have to have a Jeremiah Love and a Jadarian Price. It's kind of like what we saw this year to a degree, which is they had some great games this year offensively when Jeremiah Love didn't do a whole lot because Malachi Fields made plays, Jordan Faison made plays, Will Pauling made plays, Jadarian Price made plays, Eli Raridan made plays. It's kind of like the sum sometimes is greater than the individual parts, but we've seen Jaden Greathouse make big plays in big moments and on big stages. We've seen Jordan Faison do the exact same thing in big moments on big stages. The Sugar Bowl, the first round playoff game. You know what I mean? Like, I think they have the ability to be big time playmakers. You got to use Jordan Faison differently if you're going to let him be that kind of playmaker. You just can't have him running stops, hitches, slants all day if he's going to be that kind of playmaker. But he's got the ability to be so. Aeneas Williams is like a 50-yard run waiting to happen this year. Well, that's against the second-team defense. Yeah, running behind the second-team offensive line. Also, he's got that ability. I think Nolan James can be a playmaker. I think the two incoming freshmen can be that. I think that James Flanagan has a chance to be that kind of player down the road. I think Caden Finley is a true freshman, can be that kind of guy. I think Cam Williams has that kind of ability if you coach him up right. I mean, KK. So it's more so, it's not so much about who's the next Jeremiah Love. It's more so you have 7, 8, 9 legit weapons. And who that guy's going to be is going to depend from game to game. Some games it may be Jordan Faison's that dude. The next game it may be, Jaden Greathouse. The next game it may be Aeneas Williams. The next game it may be Kedron Young. The next game. But the one constant through all this needs to be CJ Carr. I hope that Notre Dame's All-Americans next year are your quarterback and a couple offensive linemen. Honestly, if you give me that, then if you told me that, I'm going to look into next season and they're going to have 3 first-team All-Americans next year. One's going to be a quarterback. 2 others are going to be offensive linemen. I'm like, this offense is going to be nasty because the playmakers are there. It just may not be that one guy week after week after week at the skill positions that's getting that love like Jeremiah Love did. I think it's more so it just depends on the game plan and the opponent's strengths and who's the hot hand. I just think it's more about the volume of playmakers as opposed to that one superstar type player. That's my 2 cents, Trev. What say you?
Yeah, when I think about superstar, I think about who are the go-to players in crunch time moments. That's what I think of superstars. Like I go back to the Texas A&M game. Who on a drive when it was a 34-34 ball game did Mike Denbrock elect to give the ball to in, albeit a Wildcat formation that wasn't really all that successful up till that point? But who was the player they decided to give the ball to? It was Jeremiah Love. When your backs were against the wall in the Orange Bowl in the national championship game, who did the offense start to run through? Jaden Greathouse. And so that's when I think of superstar.
It's Ohio State. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's what I think about when I think about superstar. All superstars are built differently. Think about every sport. Like, I mean, in the superstars you have in like the NBA, like Nikola Jokic is going to do it different than what Steph Curry does. But they're both superstars. And I think that's going to be what it is for Notre Dame. It's who do you get the ball to on offense in those crunch time situations? First and foremost, next season, when it's crunch time, CJ Carr has to have the ball in his hands. So then it's a question of who steps up around him. My money's going to be on Jaden Greathouse, just because we've seen him do it at the highest of the high levels you can get to in college football, the playoff semifinals and the national championship game. With all due respect to like a nighttime game at Kyle Field or a nighttime game at Hard Rock or a night game at Notre Dame Stadium, the 2 biggest possible stages you can actually play on in college football are the playoff semifinals and the national championship game.
Well, and who made the clutch third down play in Kyle Field to set up Bo Collins' big play?
Exactly.
Jaden Greathouse.
So those would be my 2 on offense. My 2 on defense, and I'm not going to go with Leonard Moore here because you could argue he already is that. So let's say he is the given. I'm going to go with Boubacar Traore and Tay Johnson on those 2 for like the superstar. Like, who do you need in a, you know what I mean?
No matter who you list or who I list as your 2, we're going to be leaving somebody out.
Yeah.
Because you can say, okay, Boubacar and Tay. Cool. I'd say Boubacar and Adon or Tay and Drake. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I the defense is going to be so good next year as long as the coaching is good. You've got potential for 4 or 5 superstars on defense next year.
Oh, yeah.
Between Leonard, between Bubakar, Josh Burnham, Bryce Young, Drake Bowen, Jaden Alsbury, Christian Gray, Adon Schuler, Tay Johnson, Dallas Golden. Like, this defense is going to be loaded next year as long as the coaching doesn't screw it up. And I'm not saying that they're going to. That's just a caveat for anything. Like, as long as the coaching doesn't screw it up, they should be pretty good. Because you went with Tay and Bubakar. Cool. I probably would have gone. My gut reaction was Bubakar and Drake. And then I'd be like, man, but what about Tay? What about Adon? You know what I mean? Like, man, Tay was the kind of hot name at the end of the year, but I mean, Adon Schuler was filthy at the end of the year this year.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, everybody talks about how good Tay was, and Tay was great, but like, let's go back to, Tay had to pick 6 against Pitt. Well, let me go back to that 3rd down pass on the first drive of the game where Adon lays the receiver out, knocks the ball out, and kills a promising drive for Pitt. Or the pick 6, pick 2 that he had against Pitt in that game. You know what I mean? Like, Adon late in the year was nasty. And so, like, that's going to, in my opinion, going to be the best safety duo coming back in college football next year.
Agreed.
Unless Caleb Downs decides he doesn't want to go to the NFL and comes back to Ohio State. And even then, I'm like, it's a debate. So, like, there's a lot more of those superstar types on defense than I think there is on offense.
Agreed.
In my opinion. But I would say another thing is I think a guy that has a chance to be a superstar next year is not a guy that hopefully ever touches the ball. And that's Gerby Lambert. That's another one on offense. But it's just, I wouldn't compare him to Jeremiah Love because he won't have the football.
Right.
We got a super chat from Indy Wine and Cheese.
Appreciate the super chat. Why has Indiana risen so fast? Does Notre Dame do those same things? If so, how has IU passed Notre Dame in 2 years and beat Ohio State? If not, what do we need to change?
I think there's some premises here that I don't necessarily agree with. Number one, first of all, why have they risen so fast? Great coaching and talent. I argued this last year. I argued with some of you guys and Vince. Indiana's a lot more talented team than people give them credit for. Yes, their schedule was soft, but that's a talented football team. Said it again this year. I had Indiana as a preseason top 10 team. I was arguing some Indiana fans, people overlooked us, and I'm like, I didn't. That is a preseason top 10 team. I believe I had Indiana in the playoffs again this year. We talked about how big the Fernando Mendoza pickup was for Indiana and how much that was going to make their offense better. It's good coaching and good roster development. I mean, the portal has allowed Cignetti to bring in like 15 of the kids that he had with him at JMU, which is a 12-1 G5 team. I mean, imagine if you took like the 15 best players off of Tulane and took them to somewhere. Like, that's going to go pretty good. Look, you know what I mean? Like, that's going to work out pretty well. And then you get the best player from Old Dominion and the best player from here and the best player from there. And then they've recruited well, and they coach very well. He has a very strong coaching staff, but they have talent and they're coached well. It's that simple. He couldn't have done this 10 years ago. Couldn't have done this 5 years ago because the rules would have been such that his players would have all had to sit out a year. And then this year they'd have been good. But some of the things that I think are flawed in your premises, I get that why we view Indiana being better than Notre Dame because this year they have a better record and they have, they're in the playoffs. They won the Big Ten. They beat Ohio State. They didn't beat the same Ohio State that Notre Dame played. Notre Dame didn't play Ohio State this year. Indiana and Notre Dame both played Ohio State last year. They both got smacked by Ohio State last year. We don't know how Notre Dame would have done against this team. So I think this notion that they've passed Notre Dame in 2 years, that's a hypothetical. I mean, in reality, they're ranked higher. They're in their playoffs. Notre Dame's not. Okay, cool. If they flip schedules, what conversation are we having right now? I'm pretty sure Notre Dame would have beat Old Dominion, Kennesaw State their first two games, and I think there's at least a chance that Indiana lost to those two teams because let's not forget, Indiana did not look very good to start the season. Like they didn't look great at all because they had, like a lot of teams, they had some new players. They beat Old Dominion 27-14 in the opener. That was not a great performance. They gave up 218 rushing yards in the opener against Old Dominion. Imagine if they'd have played that way in Miami. So I don't even want to get into how they've passed Notre Dame, and I don't necessarily accept that premise. Here's what I'll tell you, though. Indiana is a legitimately really good football team because Curt Cignetti's a heck of a football coach. He surrounded himself with a heck of a coaching staff, and they brought in a lot of talented players. And the players they brought in were bought into the team concept. He went out and didn't go get some $1.5 million SEC offensive lineman. He went and got a blue-collar, hard-working, run through a brick wall kid from Notre Dame that was not going to start for Notre Dame and turned him into a very important piece to one of the best offensive lines in college football. That's great player development. And if you look at a lot of the big-time kids they got, how many SEC kids did they add from the portal? How many former 5-stars that haven't panned out have they added from the portal thinking they're just going to get – no. They went and got kids from Cal and turned them into that. That's great development, great coaching, and that's what I think Notre Dame is also doing. I think they're better coached in some important positions. They have a better O-line coach and a better D coordinator. That's a big part of that, in my opinion. But I like what Curt Cignetti's done. I don't think they've cheated. I've seen people say he's following the rules and he's using it masterfully. I mean, who thought that, he's cheating by bringing all those JMU players with him? Who thought that when he got hired? Nobody. It wasn't until they started kicking people's butts that people are like, well, that's not fair. That's the rules. And he's done it well. And he coaches the heck out of those kids. They're prepared every week. They play hard. They don't beat themselves. He's done a heck of a job there.
Yeah, there's just so many different factors at play when it comes to this question. Why have they risen so fast? Because they had a bunch of experienced guys come in. Like the run that they've been on the last 2 years is exceptional. What happens though with IU when Mendoza's gone and Aiden Fisher's gone and D'Angelo Pons is gone and Mikel Kamara's gone and Elijah Surratt is gone and Omar Cooper Jr. is gone and D'Angelo Pons is gone. And
EJ
all
Williams.
Those, yeah, exactly. I'm not saying that's me projecting that they're just going to be terrible next season. I don't think that at all because their coaching staff is really, really good. Right. What happens if some of their coaches get poached? What if they go and move on to other jobs? I don't know the question to that. It's hard to say that
I would be upset
if
Bob Bostad was the next offensive line coach at Notre Dame. I wouldn't be upset about that at all.
No, I wouldn't either. But there's so many factors at play. The measuring tool for when a program surpasses Notre Dame is not their ability to beat Ohio State. Some of that's going to now. Look, we can have a conversation about that if IU runs the table, goes 16-0, and wins a national championship. We could talk about that then. But now, I'm hesitant. What they've done this year and what they did last year was exceptional. I'm not ready to say that they've just passed Notre Dame as a program. Notre Dame is a top 5 program in college football. Don't let their playoff snub this year fool you in thinking that. The schedules are so different. What would IU's season look like if they played Miami on the road to start the season, had a bye week, and then hosted Texas A&M at home in Bloomington? I have no idea.
Maybe they'd have won both. Maybe they lost both. Maybe they'd gone 1-1. We don't know.
Maybe.
Don't know. Right.
But I have a feeling
I'm more confident saying Notre Dame would have started 3-0 against Kennesaw State, Old Dominion, and Indiana State than if whether or not that's the whole point.
100%.
If they had basically a 5-game warm up for Oregon, right? But you also can't discount that they went to Oregon and beat Oregon in a game where they were clearly the better team. I'm not trying to take anything away from Indiana. Yeah. I'm just trying to let's see them go on a playoff run before we start talking about they've passed Notre Dame. But I also don't want to take away from the job they've done. Curt Cignetti's done a heck of a job there. And I have confidence he's going to keep this thing rolling, but it's going to be tough. He's going to have to rebuild the team a bit next year. Let's see how he does. But what he's done the last 2 years has been impressive. I don't like him. I don't like his shtick. But one thing I cannot like your shtick and say, I think you're winning, and I think you're winning the right way.
Yeah.
I don't like Curt Cignetti in press conferences. I have no problem with Curt Cignetti in between the lines for those 60 minutes of football action. I think he's one of the best in the business. That's where I'm at. But I also think Notre Dame's one of the 5 best teams in college football. I think a lot of teams would have gone 10-2 with the schedule that Notre Dame had this year. Maybe they didn't lose the first 2, but maybe they lose to Miami and A&M. Miami or USC. Maybe Miami and Pitt. Who knows? So that's kind of where I'm at. I think it's a fair question.
Yeah, absolutely.
But again, Indy Wine and Cheese, it's a good follow-up. I don't mean that they've passed Notre Dame as a program. I guess I meant more in a single season sense, but agree. Yeah, and that's kind of where I think I took it. I don't think they were a better team than Notre Dame this year. I think that their schedule was much better constructed to maximize their record. And I'm taking nothing away from the job they did against Ohio State. It's just it's a lot easier to run the table when you have to manage what they managed this year. They had one regular season game where they played a team on their level. Notre Dame had 3. And that their one wasn't for a while. Notre Dame's was right out of the gate. That to me is the difference.
Sure. From our guy, Christopher Galloway, a.k.a. Black Irish, which playoff game will you be most interested in the outcome? I know we are all down on the dumps, but this is a game that we all love. So give it a go and answer truthfully.
Miami, Texas A&M is about the only one I care about. That's it. That's the only one I care about. Same for you, Trev?
I'm in between Miami, Texas A&M, and then Oklahoma, Alabama. More so for like what the matchups would be in the second round, not necessarily for just the game itself. Because look, taking the Notre Dame aspect out of this, which is extremely hard for me to do. There are a lot of interesting storylines in this first round of the playoffs. Like some are just bad. I mean, I would be lying if I said I gave 2 rips about the Ole Miss Tulane game or the Oregon James Madison game. I just don't care.
I don't care about Oklahoma, Alabama either.
No, I mean,
it was an ugly game last time. It's going to be an ugly game this time between 2 teams that had no business being in the playoffs.
Agreed.
That's my storyline.
But the 2 storylines that I'm taking away from this that I do think is interesting is the fact like Texas A&M and Miami. Those are 2 teams that held Notre Dame out of the playoffs. Despite Notre Dame having minus 3,500 odds on FanDuel before the show kicked off, unfortunately. That I think that's an interesting storyline. The storyline for the Alabama-Oklahoma game for me is like, okay, like both of these teams have the opportunity to like silence some of the critics. I'm one of them. That this is just going to be an ugly game. It's going to be dumb. Like neither of these teams can compete for a national championship. They have the opportunity to do that. Now, do I have faith that they will? No. But I do think that's interesting.
Are you saying, like, let's say one of them smacks the other one, that would give some credibility? Okay, that makes sense. That's fair.
Yeah, that's like fair. If I have, like, and 2-sided, like if Oklahoma comes out on offense and puts up like 31 points on offense against Alabama, It's like, okay.
Like, wins like 31-17. They run the ball okay. Mateer looks like he did earlier in the season. Yeah, I get that's fair.
Yeah,
that's fair.
Like that's a storyline I could see. Now, whether I care about it is a different story entirely. But like some interesting storylines, I think. But Miami, Texas A&M probably takes the cake more so from a Notre Dame standpoint, I would say.
I just think from an interesting game standpoint, I just think that's 2 good football teams.
Sure.
And they're built different. I think Miami is a defensive-oriented team. I think A&M's more of an offensive-oriented team. It's 2 clashing styles, 2 good lines. I mean, a really good D-line going against a really good offensive line is probably the best unit matchup of the first round, in my opinion. I think that's why I think that game. I don't even look at it from a Notre Dame standpoint. It's a college football standpoint. I think that's the only matchup where it's like 2 teams that I think earned a playoff spot. Because we said the last 2 weeks of the season, Miami should be in the playoff. Our beef was not with Miami. We didn't think they should be in over Notre Dame. If it came down to those 2, it should be in over Notre Dame. But our thing was they should both be in over Bama. So I think that's the one game that I look at and say that's 2 teams that earned a playoff spot based on them being 2 of the 12 best teams of college football.
Sure. Absolutely.
Now, Tulane and JMU earned the right to be in the playoff based on the rules. I have no beef with Tulane or JMU. Everybody's like, oh, this is BS. I'm like, look, that's the rules. Don't be mad at them that Jim Phillips is a terrible commissioner who hasn't changed the tiebreaker rules in his league. Like Bama, Oklahoma, it's an ugly rematch. I just think the one game that I'm like, that's 2 good football teams coming into the to it playing pretty good football. A&M didn't play great at Texas, but they've played well overall this season. I think that's the one that'll have the most intrigue and the best matchups and just Now I say all that, it'll probably be like the ugliest game now that I say that, but that's kind of where I'm at.
Sure.
I'm also curious. A&M's got a lot of coaching staff turnover going on right now. Colin Klein's a new head coach at K-State. Jay Bateman's going somewhere. Are those guys going to be locked into doing the job they need to do? That's something that's very interesting to me in the first round.
I'm very interested to see how the offensive operation goes with them, because like Colin Klein is still coaching, but then they also just named the wide receiver coach as the replacement for him. So like what dynamic is there? It's interesting for sure.
Yeah.
From Ballpeen Shillelagh, for a few years, Notre Dame brought in a top portal quarterback. Now they've proven they can develop them internally. We've seen this at wide receiver, but not the same proven development. How big of a concern is this?
It's a concern. I mean, look, you're going to have to eventually, if you want to keep landing talented high school recruits, you got to show that you have the ability to turn high school recruits into big-time players in college. Otherwise, like, well, coach, if I want to play at Notre Dame, I'm going to go somewhere else and be developed for 2-3 years. Then I'll come play for you. I think that's a very fair concern. If you want to develop high school, if you want to keep recruiting high school kids, you got to show a willingness to actually coach them up and get them ready to play.
My level of concern of this will either go way up or way down, depending on what happens in the next 3 weeks. It's kind of how I look at this. And for all the reasons that we talked about yesterday and what we talked about with the offensive questions today, the number of portal receivers, or if any at all, will dictate how I feel about this. From Aidan Benami, am I missing something when it comes to DeBoer's name being brought up for the Michigan job? Why would somebody, not even just him, leave Bama for Michigan without personal reasons? No way.
I don't believe he is a candidate. I don't. I mean, Kalen DeBoer is going to have to be the biggest liar in the history of coaching for me to sit there and say he's going to take the Michigan job. I mean, he's flat out made it very clear, like, not only am I not interested at this time, I'm happy where I'm at. I think a lot of this is media people spinning things, looking for clicks. I've said this to you guys 1,000 times. A lot of these coaching search lists are people putting who they want out there and then spinning it, saying, no, this is what I'm hearing. People can say anything. I could tell you right now, hey, my sources said that Marcus Freeman is this, and this. And you have no way of proving me wrong. And if it doesn't happen, like, well, yeah, I mean, that's what it was true at the time, but my sources are now telling me that he's going to do this, and this. Okay, cool. You just made that crap up. You know what I mean? Like, tell me here, so I'm a journalist. You can't ask me who my sources are. You know what I mean? You can hide behind that crap. And that's why so much of this is like, oh, it's a done deal. Kalen DeBoer's a done deal. And he's like, no, it's not. And then all of a sudden, Kenny Dillingham, it's a done deal. It's a done deal. And then it's like, all of a sudden, it's not. I thought Jake Butt had a great point on this. He's like, the reporting on this has been a disaster. And people's desire to get clicks, because look, if I wrote if I was covering Michigan and I was getting ready to like use a Notre Dame analogy, I don't even want to. If I was covering Michigan and I put out a list and said, hey, talking to some people, here's a list of coaches that I think are the top candidates, it would be the most read story I've ever written. But what if I don't have any sources telling me who the real candidates are? I just say it and then put in there who I think it should be. Or follow along with what other people are saying. I could say, who are my sources? Well, I read this article and this article, but I'm not going to say that. I'm just going to say sources. Well, so technically, I'm not lying. Like, you see what I'm saying, Trevor? Like,
yeah. It'll get believed because you have a blue check mark next to your name on X. That's why it'll get believed. I mean, look, there was an alleged credentialed media person through Michigan State that said that he was like, I'm looking at Marcus Freeman's private plane right now in East Lansing, and, you know, he's going to be a favorite for this job. You know when he tweeted that out? When Marcus Freeman was actively giving his press conference for the Stanford week. He was live on YouTube giving his press conference. Just, you can't believe everything that you see out there on X. And I'm not saying that to you, Iden. This is just, we've seen a lot of this. DeBoer's not going to Michigan. I don't think anybody, I mean, somebody will go, but not a chance it's Kalen DeBoer or Kenny Dillingham not walking into that mess.
It would surprise me if Kenny Dillingham took that job. Kenny Dillingham, I think, is still a more likely option than DeBoer, because I think there's a point in time where Michigan just offer him enough money where he can't say no. But that's not true for Kalen DeBoer at Alabama. So and again, you'd have to be a fool to leave a good situation to take that job right now. Because I don't know if some of y'all saw this. They just announced a couple days ago that they are going to open up a investigation in the entire athletics department. This is not going to end well for Ward Manuel, in my opinion. It's not going to end well at all. So that's where I'm at. I don't know why. I don't know why anyone would want that job right now. Other than if you're like really low down the list and you're like, this is the only shot I have at a place like this, expectation can be super low and I can kind of rebuild this thing. I don't know why any coach who's at a legitimately good job right now would take that job. I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot. I mean, honestly, I'm being dead serious. If they called me right now and said, hey, Brian, we've been turned down by everybody. We're going to offer you $10 million to come be the head coach in Michigan. I'd say, no way. No, like, I'm not touching that. Like, that place is an absolute mess. Absolute mess. I said it the other day. If there's ever evidence of what lack of institutional control looks like, I said this the other day. I'll repeat it again. Somebody in the chat just said it also. It's Michigan. That if Ward Manuel should be fired no matter what. And I don't often say this. For me to say this is a big thing. Because one of two things is true. He knew about it and covered up and should be fired for it. Or he didn't know about it, which shows he's completely incompetent at doing his job. If you didn't know that all this was going on, and what is now being portrayed as one of the worst kept secrets in all of college football, if you genuinely did not know what was going on, then you are not qualified or competent to be the athletics director at a place like Michigan. If you did know and covered it up, you aren't qualified to be athletics director at a place like Michigan. There's no good ending for Ward Manuel being the AD, in my opinion. If they keep him on as AD, then they're basically saying, we don't really care. And they're admitting because here's what I think ultimately happened. They wanted to get rid of Sharon Moore. And this is their way of doing it without having to pay him. But what I don't think they anticipated was the blowback from it. And I don't think they anticipated him losing his mind over it. Him getting arrested turned this thing into a whole different type of thing. Because now people are digging even more and more. If it was just some infidelity, I think it'd be a big story for about 4 or 5 days. They'd hired the next coach, and then they move on. But him basically threatening to kill himself, the girl that he had the affair with, and now people are really digging into all the stuff. All these things are coming out, and now it's making it look worse and worse and worse. And so that's what I think happened. If Sharon Moore beats Ohio State and they're in the college football playoffs this year, do you think Sharon Moore's getting fired right now? Heck to the no. He's still the head coach of Michigan, in my opinion. So this is not going to end well for Michigan, in my opinion. Somebody said this the other day on the board. I think it was on the board. Maybe it was on Twitter. They just need to hire Biff Poggi as the interim full-time coach, get through this whole mess, get a new AD, and let that guy go hire somebody next year. I honestly think that would be the best thing for Michigan right now. I'm not even joking. I'm being dead serious.
Yeah, just take a page out of what Stanford did this year. I mean, to varying degrees, but you surround yourself with a
100%.
good GM. You hire an interim head coach. You wait for a new athletic director to come in. And that, 2026 is just not going to be the year. If Michigan has a winning record in 2026, that is a successful season for whoever takes over with how much is going on. All I'll say is there's a whole lot of I didn't know it was going on up in Ann Arbor over the last couple seasons. I said the same thing about when the whole cheating scandal came out, and people were like, Jim Harbaugh had no idea. It's like, so you just think that this analyst came to every meeting and was like, I know exactly what they're doing. It's like, oh, he's just doing a heck of a job. Like, come on, man. Whole lot of not knowing what's going on going up there in Ann Arbor. And like we talked about, I think it was last week, either in the buy, sell, hold, or the mailbag that we did. When stuff starts to hit the fan and people start getting fired, those fired people have a whole lot less to lose. And all those, dirty skeletons in the closet start to come out to light. It's not good. Not good at all.
Agree. That doesn't mean every coach there is that kind of guy. It's just, yeah. Yep. We had another super chat pop in there from 74 Ohio.
Thank you for the super chat. Going back to how the team is going to react to getting snubbed. If Brian Kelly were still the head coach, I'd be extremely worried. Marcus Freeman will right the ship, and 2026 will be a year for the ages.
I'll say this. I agree with the premise of I'm a lot more confident that this is going to be handled well with Marcus Freeman as a head coach than I would be if Brian Kelly. 100% agree with that. Way more. And that's not even saying that as a shot at Brian Kelly. It really isn't. It's the track record, the proof. Did Marcus Freeman respond well to the loss to Ohio State last year by having his team ready to play at the beginning of the year? No. Against two pretty good teams that they lost by 4 points against combined? No. By the end of the year, did Marcus Freeman have this team playing like one of the 3 or 4 best teams in college football? Absolutely. Absolutely. So, but I think where Trevor and I both fall is I just need to see it. Because this is all, when you're still he's still a relatively young head coach. He's still going, this will be his 5th year as head coach ever. Right? 22, 23, 24, 25. Yeah, 5th year ever. There's still always going to be, well, this is the first time we've seen this thing happen, that thing happen. Last year was the first time they made a deep playoff run. How are they going to handle it? This is the first time this program's really taken a gut punch like they did of getting left out of the playoff. How are they going to handle it? These are all new things, and until we actually see it, we don't really know how he's going to handle it. We know how Brian Kelly would have handled it, and it wouldn't have been great.
I'm going to get a jump start on tomorrow, and I'm going to buy the first part, and I'm going to hold the second part.
Yeah.
Because and 74 Ohio, I absolutely agree with where you're coming from here. Premise-wise, your heart's in the right spot. Mm-hmm. That being said, we got about 50 of these super chats after the national championship game in that post-game show. A great run, didn't end the way that we wanted to. I would not want to face this Notre Dame team in 2025. And I'm hoping it's different. And all signs say that it should be. So I'm hoping that you're right. And I do think that to some degree you will be, but now so more than ever, I got to see it. I'm very much a show me person, as you guys know, and they got to show me that this is okay. It's time. You got to show me.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
From Rocks in the Box, Brian and Trev, what is your most memorable, best and worst experience covering Notre Dame football?
Well, my 2 bests are really kind of are easy for me. My 2 best are honestly just the first time being in Notre Dame Stadium to cover a game. I mean, I'll never forget it. I mean, they played Purdue. It was game 1 of Brian Kelly era. I walk in the press conference. There's Lou Emoji there and Tim Priester there. These are guys that I grew up reading when I was a kid. You know, I couldn't wait to get my Blue and Gold Illustrated back in the day when it was a really first class publication. And just meeting Lou Emoji for the first time was like just such a humbling thing. Same thing with Tim Priester. I mean, and Lou, I've said this before, Lou and Tim were so good to me when I first got on the beat. They were so supportive, and especially Lou, which is why I went to work for Blue and Gold Illustrated, because the chance to work with Lou Emoji at a publication that I read as a child was really a dream come true in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? But just being there, I walk in, Jerry Faust is walking around, and just like you're looking at all the Sports Illustrated covers, or we're on the wall back then, behind the thing, and just looking down at the stadium. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is the coolest thing ever. You know, it was such a great thing. And then as far as a memorable positive thing, being at the Orange Bowl last year was took the cake for me. And I've seen some awesome experiences. I've been to some amazing places, and I'm so blessed to have been able to cover, games at Darrell K. Royal and, down in Athens. And I've been to, cover 2 Clemson games, at Clemson. I've been to some awesome places. I've been to bowl games, and I was at the Cotton Bowl in 2018. And, it's being at the ACC championship and covering Notre Dame's only ever conference championship game. You know what I mean? Like, there's been so many great experiences, but just watching them in the Orange Bowl last year was just such an awesome. I mean, that's going to be a game that's getting talked about for, when we're old, and which is a lot closer to for me than it is for you, Trevor. But even when Trevor's old, that'll be a game we look back and you guys remember that time. You remember that?
You better believe
field goal. Like, that's going to be a big one. And kind of like how, fans remember the 1992 Snow Bowl with Jerome Bettis catching the touchdown and then Reggie Brooks catching the 2-point conversion to win it. We all remember that. And that was a pretty cool experience. The memorable experience, the two worst they happened in back-to-back years in 10 and 11. I was in Spartan Stadium for the fake field goal that cost them that game. And then the next year I was in Michigan Stadium for the comeback win that Michigan had in the fourth quarter of that game. Oh. Those were two pretty miserable experiences. Memorable but bad memorable experiences for Notre Dame. Being there at that game in 2011 was an awesome experience overall. To watch Michigan and Notre Dame play in Michigan Stadium was such an honor and a privilege for me to be able to be there and cover that game. As a Notre Dame fan, the ending was terrible. As someone who loves college football, that is something that I look back and overall positively, I'm so honored to have been there. But it's also a worst experience because as a Notre Dame fan, you get your heart ripped out because you just think, that place was quiet. And then to just see it erupt in the last 30 seconds was just like, well, this sucks. This absolutely sucks.
Yeah. The sample size for me is obviously a lot smaller. I've been a fan since I was 8 years old. I've only been covering the team now for actually what's crazy is the last 2 seasons, 24 and 25. It doesn't feel like it's been like that, Brian. It's cool. I love it. But most memorable, the first one's very easy for me, doing the post-game show after the Texas A&M game. I got married the next day. I got to hang out with everybody just kind of the night before the wedding. And that was the biggest regular season win. That was it. It was okay. They lost to Ohio State in 22. They lost to Ohio State in 23. Can they get that early big win? And it also, I would have been up until 2, 3 in the morning anyways, just kind of running through my thoughts of what was going to happen the next day. So that was fantastic. First post.
I remember that conversation thinking about that, Trev. You going to want to do that? Dude, you have to do that. He's like, no, trust me. I'm going to want to be doing that.
Believe me, bro. I needed to be around some other people talking some ball. And so that was great. And then my first time also ever in the press box last year against Virginia on senior day. Because, look, I'd been to dozens of Notre Dame games prior to that and been around for some insane moments. 22 Clemson, 06 UCLA, 2010 Utah, 2012 Pitt. I was in attendance for all of those. And the magnitude of the Virginia game was not what those games were, right? But being up there in the press box, same with you. It's first of all, I think that was the first time you and I had met in person, even though we had been doing a lot of work together prior. But that was the first time I met you in person. And then I get up to the press box and kind of same thing that you had with, Loose Emoji and Tim Priester. I had the same thing. I listen to Tim Priester all the time. In the press box that day, I sat next to Chuck Freebie, who I remember watching on News Center 16 countdown to kickoff.
Awesome dude.
Awesome, bro.
Great guy.
It was great.
Don't tell him I said that, everybody, because Chuck and I have this thing where we bust each other's chops all the time. So don't tell him I said this, but Chuck is an awesome, awesome guy. Love Chuck. Yeah. Yes.
Being up there was so cool. And when you've been to Notre Dame Stadium as a fan as many times as I had, it's tough to have a new experience there. And that was just, to the nines. I still think about it all the time. Still have my pass. It's right here next to me on the desk. And then the two worst, the post-game show after Northern Illinois was bad.
Yeah. that was not good.
That was really bad. And then honestly, the second worst was a week and a half ago. On that Sunday selection show, we go live and we found out live on air that that Notre Dame didn't make the playoffs. That's honestly the second worst. That was bad. That was really rough. Now again, sample size is a little different for me. I hadn't been in attendance in a game where they lost. So those are probably my two. But the memorable ones in a good way are the ones that stick out the most. That's for sure.
Yep. Some a lot of great memories covering the sport. And just because a game is a loss doesn't mean it wasn't awesome. The 2019 Georgia game sucked for the outcome, but that's an experience I'll never forget. Just the Georgia fans that whole weekend were just awesome. They were so kind. The environment it's an outdoor press box. So it just was an amazing environment. It was so awesome.
That's so sick.
Yeah, it was very cool.
An outdoor press box at night in Athens is.
And when I say outdoors, Clemson's outdoors, North Carolina's outdoors, but it's in a normal press box area. It's more open. It's like an open press box where you're in a press box, but it's open. Georgia, you're actually like down. You're like, there's fans behind you and fans in front of you. You're like in a row. And it was so cool.
That's so sweet.
It was so cool. It really was. I had to have headphones on to like drown out the noise. I didn't need headphones to drown out typing next to me like I normally do. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't have heard it anyway, but it just was so I could think. It was so awesome. I've been so blessed to be able to do this job. I really am. And now doing it as kind of my own boss is pretty awesome. But like, there's been so many cool experiences. First time I was at the Coliseum, I mean, it was for the 2014 game, but wasn't a great game. But just being on the field afterwards, walking into the tunnel to get to the press conference, I'm like, dude, I'm going in and out of the tunnel that like we saw the 66 Packers and was it Packers and Raiders? Wasn't that the first Super Bowl? Packers and Raiders? Or was it Packers and Chiefs? Come out. This is where the first Super Bowl was played. This is 84 Olympics were played. Like this is where all these great Notre Dame USC games were played. Like stuff like that's always been pretty awesome. Yeah, it's gonna be awesome.
From Zach Martin, a little fun off-season question based strictly on upside or talent, however you want to define it, instead of readiness to contribute. Who is in your 2 deep in the secondary 4-5 base defense?
Oh, this is a great one.
Yeah.
So I'm going to combine readiness. I'm going to define mine as a combination of upside. To me, is part of upside is readiness. So I'm going to combine those two to give you my answer. My starting lineup next year is Leonard Moore in the boundary, Christian Gray to the field, Dallas Golden as my nickel, Tay Johnson and Don Schuler are my safeties. And then my rotation at safety is I'm going to have Jadon Blair is definitely in my rotation. And then I'm going to have a battle in the spring and fall between Luke Talich and Ethan Long. That's going to be where I'm at. And then let's see if, like Joey O'Brien's going to be in that mix as well. My 2 deep at corner is going to be Kari Adams in the boundary and Mark Zachary to the field. And my backup nickel, that's a tougher question. I have to think about who my backup nickel would be. I'd probably get one of the safeties ready to be like my big nickel. I'd get like maybe Jadon Blair, maybe get somebody like that to be more of a factor. That I honestly would not be completely against the idea in some certain big nickel situations where I wouldn't mind putting a Don Schuler nickel, let him beat up the slot and have Tay and Jadon back there on the back end showing super range and like some sort of like cover 2 or 2-man type of look where just, Don beats a guy up and if they run past him, fine, you've got a safety there to protect them in some big nickel looks. But the only one I'm not sure of, Zach, would be who my number 2 nickel would be right now. That's the one I'm uncertain of, but the rest I feel pretty good about. What say you, Trev?
No, I agree absolutely with the first team defense. I'm there with you. I'd put Kari Adams in the boundary. I'd also flirt with the idea if you want a bigger nickel, maybe putting Aiden Pouncey there, seeing what he can do as more of a bigger nickel spot. I mean, a 6'3" guy there, that's interesting too. I'll tell you what, though.
Or Joey O'Brien.
Yep, or Joey O'Brien.
Until his senior year.
I don't know if it's going to be next year, but I guess it would have to be next year if I'm going to include Luke Talich in this. But I just think of like a dime look where your 3 safeties, you just put like, Jadon Blair, let him roam underneath. Or I'd put Luke Talich, let him roam underneath, kind of play at linebacker depth. And then my 2 deep safeties are Jadon Blair and Joey O'Brien. Just eat up half the field if they just stretch their arms out.
Your Hail Mary defense better include Jadon Blair, Luke Talich, and O'Brien, and Aiden Pouncey. Like, seriously, and Leonard Moore. Like, that is my Hail Mary stopping defense. It's literally that. Like, it's Joey O'Brien, Jadon Blair, and you just better hope you don't need more than 4, in case you want to redshirt somebody, hope you don't need more than 4 Hail Marys in the season. But yes, if it's like a Hail Mary, the game on the line, it's Jadon Blair, Joey O'Brien, Luke Talich, Aiden Pouncey, and Leonard Moore are my 5 DBs running backwards. And good luck. Good luck catching that.
Good Lord.
Yeah. Yes. Good luck with that. It's a good
Oh,
question,
that's fun.
Zach.
Fun to think about.
Good question.
From Frank G, how long do you think Coach Freeman has to make a decision on the linebacker coach decision, and what affects the timing of this decision the most regarding the college football calendar?
He doesn't have to rush this decision at all. I mean, the normal offseason for Notre Dame wouldn't start for over a month. They're in finals now. They're going to be going home for Christmas in a couple weeks. They're going to come back. They're going to be jumping right into the strength conditioning program. I mean, as long as he's got a guy hired by late January, February, I'm fine. And so now if he has someone in mind and he makes a hire right now, great. Like, as I said, this is a position where people say, who do you want him to hire? And I'm always like, couldn't tell you enough linebacker coaches to tell you who he should hire, other than this is a position I trust Marcus Freeman to make a smart hire because this is his baby. And but he maybe he wants to wait for the NFL season, the NFL coaching window to open up. Maybe there's an NFL guy he likes. Maybe there's a coach he likes whose team's playing in the playoffs. Let the season finish. You don't need to rush this decision. You just got to have a guy ready for spring ball. Well, what about recruiting? Whoever you hire won't be a better recruiter than Marcus Freeman for linebackers anyway. So most likely. So I don't think there needs to rush, and I don't think the calendar changes all that. You're not going to the portal for guys. Marcus Freeman's going to be having the conversation with linebackers in the roster. So will Chris Ash. So there's just no rush to this decision, in my opinion.
Same page here.
All right, let's see here. Pete Weber, this is a question that we're going to address more down the road because we need to think through this answer as well, honestly. And so that's why I just right now I'm not ready for that one. Here's an interesting one from Salty.
Who is the best portal quarterback currently?
This is a good question. I would say that right now, DJ Lagway is probably the most talented portal quarterback, but he's also the one with the second most red flags. I think Dylan Raiola probably has the most red flags for me. Dylan Raiola is another talented one. And I don't know that, I don't know that I want to say this because you do have to kind of bet on talent a little bit, but a guy that I think is a really good potential portal guy at quarterback is the Sorsby kid from Cincinnati. I mean, he's the most proven. And this is a kid that accounted for 36 touchdowns this year, had over 3,400 total yards, put a Cincinnati team that wasn't very good last year kind of on his shoulders. He's incredibly experienced. I mean, he started for parts of a year at Indiana in 2023. He might have the highest floor of all the quarterbacks in the portal. I got a lot of red flags about the other kids that are in the portal, honestly. Sam Levitt, major red flags about him. Dylan Raiola, DJ Lagway. These are very talented players, but they're also very high-risk players. I would have a lot of concerns about these guys, Trev. I really would. But
I'll tell you what.
As far as most talented, I'd probably go DJ Lagway as just most talented.
Yep. I would too. Another name to keep your eye out on. I'm fully expecting. I have no sources on this. It's just kind of following trends and patterns. If Drew Mestamaker is not down in Bloomington, Indiana after what he did at North Texas, I'd be shocked.
Well, I could see him following Eric Morris to Oklahoma State. I mean, if you think about it, like, why not follow the guy that just turned you into a freshman All-American to the school, the Big 12 school he's at now?
True.
Like, honestly, that's what I would do if I was him. I mean, I get what you're saying makes total sense. And if his coach was still like, if his coach hadn't already moved on to Oklahoma State, let's just say Eric Moore stayed at North Texas, then I would completely understand. He's a Texas kid, so I could see him wanting to stay in Big 12 country and go follow him to. I don't know that he will.
I could see that too,
but I would like to see him follow him to Oklahoma State. I would much rather see that.
Sure.
To be honest with you, but that'd be an interesting one. Very interesting. And I'm like, that's the thing is like, who does Indiana get? Like, who's their next quarterback? Are they going to go to the portal again, or do they have a kid that they feel is ready to kind of be that guy? I don't know the answer to that question. So like that, and some of these teams is like, they're basically just because who was Fernando Mendoza's backup this year? It's his brother.
Yeah.
I mean, is his brother as good as he is? I don't know. He's a pretty athletic kid. I don't know if they view him as a future or not. I don't know.
Another player, he doesn't have the proven production, and I can't believe I forgot to name him, is Kenny Minchie. he's another.
Well, but like Kenny Minchie's not in this conversation to me as best portal quarterback because he just hasn't played.
Sure,
and I can't put him on the same line as guys who have played.
Oh, agreed.
You know, could Kenny end up being the most productive of this group? Sure, if he goes to the right school. But I still have to go with the guys that have performed better, or at least performed at all so far.
Yeah, totally.
But I mean, it's a talented group. You know, it's just there's some major red flags in this group for me. There really are. All right. We got a super chat from Raymond Harden. Raymond said, just want to thank you, Brian, for giving us a great place to follow our favorite team. Also, for hiring Trevor. He's been a great addition. I agree. I very much agree. And when you hire good people and then you lose good people, it's a challenge to hire good people to replace them. And I think I've been very fortunate that we've been able to do that so far. So I'm very, very, very happy that Trevor's on the team. And I'm not just saying that. I truly believe it.
Happy to be here.
All right.
That's for sure.
Yep. All right. Couple more I want to get to before we get out of here. We won't get to a lot of these, but I did want to get to a few. Salty said, is Texas Tech the most likely place to which Brandon Sorsby will transfer? Bonus intel, his girlfriend just transferred to Texas Tech. I mean, I could see that. You know, I mean, I could see him going there. I think it'd make a lot of sense. You're going to get paid, right? Isn't he a Texas kid? Let me look real quick. I thought he was a Texas kid. I could be completely wrong on that. Yeah, he's from Dallas. I mean, so that would make a lot of sense. You know, so why not? You're going to get paid. It's a great program. You're going to have talent around you. I think that'd make a ton of sense. Ton of sense. And not even just for money. I think his development, him being a guy that's going to go produce somewhere and be on an even bigger stage. I would have preferred him stay at Cincinnati. I just finished what you started, but I mean, I don't ever get upset when guys want to put themselves on the biggest stage they possibly can. That tells me something about them, and it's not just about money. So that's an interesting one. Let's do a couple here before we get out of here. So this one from Pete Weber. Will the committee come up with a better way to weigh cupcake wins versus tough losses? Seems off. We'd be in the playoffs if we start with Eastern Illinois and Western Kentucky. Now, I understand that, but I understand where you're coming from. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. Maybe they'd be in the playoff, but would Notre Dame be prepared to do damage in the playoffs if they hadn't played any? If the USC is the only good team they've really played all year, USC and Pitt are the two toughest games. I mean, say whatever you want about Indiana, but their 13-0 record included wins over Oregon and Ohio State. Neither one of them were at home. You know what I mean? So, but the committee already does weigh this. I mean, that's strength of schedule, strength of record, the relative data, stats, and all that is already taken into account. The problem isn't that there's not a better way. The problem is they just chose to ignore it. The data's already there, Pete. And this is what he kept saying. The data's already there. And by the way, thank you for the email that you sent me, Dave. I'm glad that you got that thing. Or Pete, I mean that you got that thing, but in the mail. And also congratulations on you and your wife's, going to be having a baby. That's awesome stuff. But I think the data is already there. The way is already there. They literally just chose to ignore it. The data is why Notre Dame was ninth to begin with.
Yeah.
Over Bama and Miami to begin with is because of that data. They just chose to ignore it in the final rankings. So that's the problem. It's not, is there a better way? The way is there. They just chose to ignore it. And that's the issue.
From Cubby Blue Guru, what 2026 freshmen will be early enrollees for the spring?
24 of the 27 signees will be early enrollees.
Good.
The only three that won't are Ian Premer, Ben Nichols, and Gregory Patrick. Everybody else is an early enrollee. All the DBs, all the D-line. The fact when I saw that Elijah Golden was going to be an early enrollee, I almost tried to do a backflip. Notice I said I would have tried to do a backflip. Almost tried to do a backflip. Would not have successfully done it. But that's a little inside joke with Sean Davis. But yeah, I mean, I'm like, Elijah Golden's going to get 6 months in a weight room. 7 months in a weight room before fall camp. Sign me up. Tiki Hola is going to get 7-8 months in a weight room. Sign me up. All 5 receivers are going to be on the roster. Both running backs. Like, I'm fired up, dude. Let's watch. I mean, Cardi Adams is going to be there in January. Joey O'Brien, Aiden Pouncey, Chaz Smith, Nick Reddish. Like, I'm fired up about this, man. But yeah, 24 of the 27 will be early enrollees, which is huge.
Wow.
Absolutely huge. Trev, are there FanDuel odds on this already?
There aren't. I already looked. I know there was one service that had him as the number 1 preseason Heisman Trophy candidate. There's one service that did, but FanDuel doesn't have those odds out yet.
He'll be top 5 with most people next year, in my opinion. He'll be top 5.
I think he'll start out second behind Julian Sayin in most major.
Yeah, and then obviously, depending on where guys go in the portal, some of those guys will jump in. Arch Manning will get a ton of Heisman hype next year. And yeah, this is a good one right here from Andre.
Who of the current receivers needs to take a step up for next year's team to be that much better?
I think when I say take a step up, it's like, okay, get Greathouse healthy and play him. That's not him taking a step up. That's just him playing. I think the guy that could have the biggest impact on next year's wide receiver room, there is only one answer to me of the current receivers, because I don't count Caden Finley and Bubba Frazier and those guys as current receivers. It's Cam Williams.
Yep.
He's number 1 to me. Micah Gilbert's number 2 to me. And then either KK Smith or Elijah Burris, one of those two has to step up. Like those 3 guys, that's exactly my order. No player stepping up and having a big offseason could have a greater impact on this football team at arguably any position than Cam Williams. Like, and I'm talking like if you could say you could pick any breakout, you get to choose it. You get to wave your magic wand and choose it. Breakout from one guy who's like not playing a whole lot, didn't do a whole lot, that becomes a dude. I'm not talking about like CJ goes from what he did last year to Joe Burrow. I'm talking about a guy that like hasn't done a whole lot at Notre Dame yet. Who could go from not doing a whole lot to being a game changer? And there's nobody that could do that more, in my opinion, than Cam Williams. And I don't know that there's a close second for me. So that's the one for me. Big time. Big time.
Same page. I don't want to say I don't know if you couldn't pick a second, because Micah Gilbert stepping up absolutely would be huge. Like there are other players, but Cam Williams far and away.
James Flanagan, stepping up could be a good one. Armo Mukum there's other guys to mention. I just don't know that any of them are nearly as close as what Cam could be. And it's also a position of need as well. With that in mind, John Stryker also asked, should Notre Dame look at bringing in Nick Marsh from Michigan State? If they do, could that frustrate current players in the roster? I would. If Nick Marsh is interested in Notre Dame and you do your due diligence and you think he's a good fit for your locker room, and he may be, I don't know. I don't know Nick Marsh at all. This isn't questioning that. It's always a question you should have to ask for a kid that's not a part of your team. You should have asked that about Riley Leonard. You should have asked that about, Jordan Clark. You should have asked that about Jared Dawson, all the guys you've brought in. As long as he checks all those boxes, even if doesn't change my opinion of Cam Williams, I still want Cam Williams to come be that guy. I think you can't turn down a guy like Nick Marsh. If he's interested in you, you make a run at him. Because if Cam doesn't step up, you've got a dude. But if Cam does step up and Nick Marsh is as good as advertised, you can play them both. You have a dynamic 4 to 5 man rotation that is the envy of college football, in my opinion. If Cam steps up and Nick Marsh comes in, I might try a backflip. I'm serious. Like maybe I'll use a trampoline, but that would be amazing if both of those things happen. That'd be amazing.
John, as long as the communication is such that the current receivers in the room understand what's happening, then I'm all on board for it. Obviously, as long as all the other things follow suit too. He's a fit. He's all those other things. Mm-hmm. But as long as there's communication, if somebody goes in and tells the receiver room, hey, we're running with the guys that we have here. We have what we need. And then a week later, a story breaks that Nick Marsh is going to Notre Dame. That's when I don't think the coaching staff would do their due diligence. But as long as it checks all the boxes, to Brian's point, yeah, let's ride.
This is a really good one that I saw.
From Wet Card 10, why do you think this team only plays great when it is do or die football? What can Freeman do to get this group to play like it is their last, like they do after we lose?
Honestly, I think it'd be getting away from even having that mindset and just really, truly adopting his one game at a time mindset. I think it's been different things every time. I honestly, I wish I could put my finger on why they have to lose a game before they finally have the focus to go out there and dominate people. I really wish I knew the answer to that. And I think part of that is that's just what they know. I mean, that's what this team has been. That's what they know. They know this. How do you get them to the point where they don't need that? That's a great question. Great question. And I honestly don't know the answer. I think part of it is just getting some of that early season success, coming out and winning your first couple games and getting that underneath you and then having the, you know what it comes down to, Trevor, is I don't know how this comes to be or how it gets fixed, but it's something you and I have said a million times. Can you handle, how do you learn how to handle success? This team has shown they can handle adversity as good as anybody. This team has not shown under Marcus Freeman they can handle success. And until you learn what that looks like and how to do that, this is going to continue to be an issue. What are the things you got to do? I wish I had an answer. I don't have an answer. And I don't know that Marcus Freeman has an answer yet. And I don't know that if Nick Saban was here, he would necessarily have an answer. That comes with time. You know, I mean, we saw Alabama have some miserable failures before they won a title. I mean, not even forget the Louisiana Monroe in year one. Let's go back to the Sugar Bowl the year before they won their first title, when we watched Utah just whoop them. And they got embarrassed on the national stage. I mean, that team wasn't ready to play that day. You know, got whooped by Florida in the SEC title game. Like, then they had to come out the next year and prove they could handle adversity and success, and that team went on a run. I don't know the answers to it.
This is when it comes in that I hope that he can pull the strings of how this season ended. I mean, honestly, because that's it. I mean, if the 2025 season, and I could be wrong here, but if the 2025 season doesn't tell you that you have to play like every game like it's your last in 2026, I don't think anything will. But then we're just going to have to see this pattern of they're going to lose one of their early games, and then they're going to win 10 or 11 games straight, and then they'll hopefully make the playoffs. But if how this last regular season ended didn't show Marcus Freeman from the top of the top down to a walk-on long snapper that every single game is do or die, then I don't think anything will. And that's what makes this offseason so critical.
Got three more I want to get to. There's a lot of good questions. I think these three are going to be great to end with.
From Robert Bishop, do you guys think that if we had the same record, 10-2, but had beaten one of either A&M or Miami, but maybe had lost to NC State, would we be in?
No, because the narrative would be different, but it'd be the same narrative. I think they were going to screw a 2-loss Notre Dame team out this year, no matter what.
Yeah,
like this year, because there was other 2-loss teams to compare them to. If Alabama was 9-3 in the regular season, they're not ranked ahead of Notre Dame.
Yep.
That's just, if Miami was 9-3 in the regular season, they're not ranked ahead of Notre Dame. Like last year, they were just going to screw Notre Dame, a 2-loss Notre Dame, screw Notre Dame. Then they said, well, yeah, you beat A&M, but look at what happened. You couldn't even beat NC State at home. That's what the story would be.
I mean, the narrative would have been the same thing that I said about Alabama, except the media doesn't perceive Notre Dame like Alabama. The narrative around Notre Dame would have been like, let's just say they beat Miami, lose to A&M, and lose to NC State. The question around Notre Dame would have been, okay, well, then who have you beaten since August 31st? Because other people didn't view USC like that. Other people didn't view Pitt like that. That's what it would have been. Notre Dame was in a lose-lose scenario, unfortunately. Like if they were 11-1 and lost to one of those, we're talking about them hosting, potentially getting a bye. But if they were 10-2, they were going to get hosed regardless. From Michael Lynch, what do you think is a manageable amount of CFP caliber teams Notre Dame should have on their schedule?
So when I think CFP caliber, I think playoff caliber, I think top 15-ish, top 15 to 16. I think 3 is an ideal number, 2 to 3. And then I want to see 2 to 3 top 30 teams also on the schedule. I think that's where to go. And not even just so you can have the record capable of getting in at 10-2, but more so that's just how you build your team to get ready to go on a run in the best case scenario.
Oh yeah.
Notre Dame didn't necessarily have that in 2024, but I think that's kind of where I want to be. I want to play 2 to 3 playoff caliber teams a year and see how you perform against them and go handle your business. I mean, Ohio State did that last year, right? I mean, you talk about Oregon last year, Indiana, that's 2 right there in the regular season that were playoff caliber teams that they had to play in the regular season. So I think that's kind of where I'd want to be in the regular season.
Yep. My number's 3, and I would play 1 every 4 games. Like 1 in the early window.
Yeah.
Yep. 1 in the early window, 1 around the bye, and then 1 towards the end of the season, ideally. Then from Archer,
this will be the last one, Trev. This will be the last one. Man.
From Archer, our resident Ohio State fan in the chat, teams like Oregon, Indiana, and Miami.
Real quick, Penn State as well. We forgot about Penn State last year as well. That's another one. So, again, that's 3 playoff contenders that they had to play in the regular season. They went 2-1 against those teams, and I think that prepped them to be ready to go on that run. They've been battle tested against teams like that in the playoffs. So yeah, forgot about Penn State. Please continue with your question.
Teams like Oregon, Indiana, and Miami have seemingly given up on developing quarterbacks coming out of high school and relying solely on portal quarterbacks. Do you think teams can have sustained success doing that?
I don't. And that's a theory because this is just all kind of new. And so far it's worked out well for Oregon, right? They've done 3 in a row. Bo Nix, Dylan Gabriel, Dante Moore. I just don't know that you can continue to do this year after year after year. I don't, especially with the move to the Big Ten. I'm very curious about that. Same thing with Indiana. I think at some point in time, you're just going to get to the point where what if the well dries up? What if teams are just willing to spend and able to spend more money on keeping their own quarterbacks? I think the thing that happened with Indiana that helped Indiana this year is you and I talked about we were going through a transition in quarterback in college football. That the next stars of college football are a bunch of young kids who have never really played a lot of football. It's CJ, Julian Sand. We talked about DJ Lagway in the offseason. We talked about Arch Manning. We talked about a lot of those young guys. Well, if Francisco Mendoza's coming up next year at Indiana, he's not the Heisman Trophy winner. But this year he is because, you compare his numbers to past Heisman Trophy winners, he's more Ian Book than he is Joe Burrow. You know what I mean? But it's just this is the year where there was that young group of guys that were going to naturally not have quite the same numbers they're going to have in year 2 and year 3. I'll say it like this: if Mendoza's going against year 2 starting Julian Sand, year 2 starting CJ Carr, year 2 starting Arch Manning, and guys like that, he's not winning the Heisman Trophy. He's not sniffing the Heisman Trophy, in my opinion. That doesn't take it all away from how great he was this year. It's just circumstances sometimes lead to that.
Sure.
And so will they be as happy in that situation? I don't know. Miami, we'll see. We'll see. I have a hard time thinking that you can just continue to repeat it year after year after year. It's worked for those teams though so far. Can it work for a decade? I just have a hard time with that. Unless you're going to eventually start getting a couple portal guys that have multiple years of eligibility left, then that's a different story. That's where I'm at.
Yeah.
So what's
really?
Have you agreed? Disagree?
Yeah, man. It's really interesting because there's some programs that, unfortunately, because the state of football now is you want immediate results. I think a lot of things started to stem out, and there was a ripple effect after Indiana's very, very rapid ascension in college football. So now teams just don't want to wait to develop a quarterback. Unfortunately, they don't want to take the route of, okay, let's get a guy in, let's redshirt him. Is he ready to go as a redshirt freshman? Do we wait till he's a redshirt sophomore? A lot of for all the Julian Sains and CJ Carrs that work out, there's probably 5 more that don't. And so there's a lot of teams that would just rather go. It's like, I watched him play at the college level against these teams in this conference. I know what he can do for us. A lot of it's just lack of patience, in my opinion. So we'll see if it can be sustained. But overall, do I think teams like that can have sustained success? No, because I don't think any team can have sustained success in the portal. For all the great things that Indiana's done, I'm very interested to see what they do and can they continue to build up a high school recruiting pipeline, because you can't rely on. Which
they're trying to do. They're trying to do that. Yeah,
they are.
To his credit, my point being, to back your point though, Trevor, I think he sees that we have to do more recruiting at the high school level for long-term success.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is what he had to do for current success, but you're seeing him push harder for top kids in high school, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah, 100%. So Yes, I do not think that teams can have sustained success doing this. Well, folks, that is going to do it for us here today on the Irish Breakdown podcast. We'll be back tomorrow for the buy, sell, hold. Salty already has the thread up on the premium message boards. Reminder, buy, sell, hold is something that we do for our premium message board members. Go and get your submission in there. We will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Go and listen to the Steyers tonight on the IB Nation Sports Beat show. It goes live here a little bit under an hour, so make sure you tune into that. On your way out of here, hit that like. Hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family, anybody that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So until tomorrow, that is Brian. I'm Trevor. We'll see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.